Everyone, the time is 6:32, and I would like to call this District 204 Committee of the Whole meeting to order. Marilyn, could you please call the roll?
Member Alvarez, Member Vita Daniels.
Present.
Member Dillon.
Present.
Member Nava.
Present.
Member Strewing is absent. Member Thomas.
Here.
Member Gretsch.
Here. Great. Can I ask everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We do have a request from a board member to participate remotely due to a personal illness. May I please have a motion to approve board member Tim Alvarez to participate via phone conference due to illness?
So moved.
Second. Great. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. All right, great. And we're going to dial him in a little bit later in the meeting, but thank you for that. All right, our next item is public participation. Marilyn, do we have anybody signed up? No? All right. Great, well then we can just jump right in. Curriculum and instruction. So we're going to begin this evening with the first reading of curriculum change proposals. Scott Agerty.
Thank you, President Gretsch. So we do have a number of proposals to take you through tonight as a first reading. Just wanted to give you a little bit of history and a little bit of a clarity of our process. We don't make changes to the curriculum lightly. It takes a bit of time and a bit of conversation to get even where we are tonight. And even tonight, you'll notice you don't have administrative recommendations yet. So I did include a flow chart. We found this to be helpful to review just so that there's a sense of what's happened before today. Our courses are developed by division chairs. They meet with their departments in their division. They put together different things and then bring them forward for a first administrator review, which is a meeting with me. And so I'll ask a couple questions. I know there'll be certain things that we need to make sure we have in place that may not be there. That gives them the opportunity to go and finalize it, to bring a finalized proposal. Then I'll decide at the second administrator review if it's ready to go forward. Sometimes we do deny proposals to that point. There was one this year and that had to do more with wanting to change levels of an existing course just so kids at North could get dual credit and not kids at South. I didn't think that was a good path forward yet, so we tabled that. So then it moves on to what's called the CSD team, that's Curriculum Staff Development Team. That's a group that includes representatives from each of the division chairs, a teacher from each of the departments, and also those administrators, our central office curricular team that includes Dr. Owens, myself, Dr. Rowe, and then we also include the principal, associate principals, because they deal with the scheduling. So we really want everyone to get eyes on these proposals to see the feasibility, the facility space, the usage, all those kinds of things. Following that, there's a vote taken. So those votes that you see tonight, that's where those votes came from. It came from that team. Central office, at CSD team, things happen too. Sometimes people vote no, and we don't pass it forward. Sometimes the chair will say, you know what, I want to pull this. And we've done that before too, where it's like, you know what, this probably isn't ready or given other circumstances. So they're getting fewer and fewer as we go along. Brings us to the central office review, where I give a thumbnail sketch, and obviously other members of the central office team were part of that conversation. And we finalize the slate to bring to you tonight, which is our first reading at the board level. So I'll take you through each of the proposals. You feel free to ask any questions that you have. I'll answer as many of them as I can, and if not, I'll get answers for you. Then if we need to, we can go reconvene that curriculum staff development team. Certainly talk to the department and division chairs, and then the central office will make a recommendation prior to the next meeting that will bring it forward for a vote. If it's voted forward, then we build the academic program guide, add in those new courses, open it up for enrollment, and fall of '25, it'll exist. So, so hopefully that makes sense to you as to why we go through all this. Some of these are pretty major as far as new or different. Some are adding courses, changing courses, and as we go through them, I'll explain sort of the impetus for all of them. In your packet, you have a spreadsheet on, I believe, page 4, that what is the course and what division does it come from. I'll take them in that order. You then have a table that includes a summary that comes from the proposal itself and the votes that were taken at the CSD team, followed by the actual proposals themselves. So, again, anything's fair game, any questions you might have, and again, I'll do my best to answer what I can today and get you the answers if I don't have them tonight. Ready?
Sure.
All right.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks for
We're
walking
going
us
to
through.
start with yoga. We have Yoga 1 and Yoga 2, however, it's all at North Campus. And years ago, when we were looking what PE classes we could run at South, yoga was number 1. We didn't run it at the time. We didn't really feel we had the facility to do it. Kurt Johns, the chair of physical welfare, really wanted to propose it to offer this year. But given the construction at South, we absolutely knew we didn't have the facility. But what we've been able to do is build into the new facility plan. We've earmarked a space where we could do yoga. So Yoga 1 and 2 right now is extremely popular at North. There are 2 sections every period all throughout the day, both semesters. It's really kind of amazing. So we're looking, there's certainly an interest to do it as a sophomore course, a sophomore credit, and that's what that proposal is. Any questions on that one? That was kind of straightforward, but.
Only just that this says level 3, but you said we had a space issue. Are we doing 1 and 2 then at South Campus?
That's Yoga 1. I'll get to Yoga 3 in just a second.
Sorry.
Yep,
Okay.
Yoga 1's at
That
South.
sounds good.
Yoga 3 is the next one, and that's only at North. And Yoga 3 is not unlike kids who take scuba more than once. If you take Yoga 3, that means you've already done well in Yogas 1 and 2, and you actually can get certified to be a yoga instructor, a certified yoga instructor. So just for reference too, Yoga 1 and 2 do earn college credit. It's 1 hour of credit. It's not a ton of credit, but it's still college credit. This Yoga 3, you end up with that certified yoga instructor. We're not sure we'll get college credit for it. It'll depend on whether COD has a similar course or not. That's something we're still trying to find out. And if they don't, we'll look and see if other local community colleges have something similar. So, but this is really for the kids who are really, really gung-ho about yoga and want to go into become the certified yoga. They'll actually get to lead classes from time to time as well. So
That's great.
kind of feel like we need to be sponsored by Lululemon at some point, yoga that we're doing, but
How
And-
many, I'm just curious, because you said every section, every period of the day, how many kids are in a class?
I believe that one's capped at 26, Ed, for yoga.
I'm not sure, but I think yoga is back a full
Is it?
class. Let me look.
I think it said 26 on a further page down, which
Oh,
I was
all the way
always
down.
looking into the details. It does say 26, I think.
Yeah, the studio, like, we use a regular classroom as the studio, and it is tight. I know when it's going. Yeah,
26
Is
is on the
my-
form.
okay, great.
Yeah. It's very popular. That's great.
There we go.
Yeah.
Hold on. I can find it.
Other yoga questions? It's really fit well into the SEL curriculum, and just sort of, the kids who are taking it are like, it's a great day to just sort of time during the day, just recenter and do their thing, so. I know their faculty would like us to run yoga at lunch as well. All right, so that's the physical welfare proposals. The next one comes from math science. It's for pre-calculus. We have pre-calculus prep, pre-calculus Excel, and pre-calculus honors. Calculus is calculus. It's not like there are versions of calculus and you just do some or none or less. What we're finding is that for many of the students who are in pre-calculus prep, their goals don't tend to lead toward calculus, and those students who are going into a college major or looking to do something that would require calculus, we very much suggest that they take pre-calc Excel or honors. If you've been in a prep level math track, the next one obviously would be to be in pre-calc Excel. Pre-calc prep has a wide variety of students in it currently. But what we have are other math classes that are more fitting for students who aren't going into math and science majors. Not only is there statistics, but there is a course called College Algebra. College Algebra is designed for students in particular who are going on to a 2-year college so that they don't end up in a course where they have to take a remedial math class based on a test score. So if you finish the College Algebra class with a C or better, you're automatically placed into a college-bearing credit-bearing college course. And that's really the course that we think students should be in instead of pre-calc prep. If someone still wants to, again, if they want to take pre-calc Excel, totally open to them and would be in support of that. And then there's also other options for them to take that aren't in the calculus pathway. So as we look to make sure our students are actually leaving here and landing in the best possible place, it's been a consideration for quite some time to drop this particular class so that students are best prepared for where they go next.
Do we feel that if the kids are interested in going into the calculus prep course, that they have, I'm sorry, not prep, calculus Excel, that they have enough support to, so if they're like, because, they're riding the fringe.
Sure.
There, maybe they're not sure if they're going to, where they want to go, but they don't want to kind of shoot themselves in the foot, so to speak, if they don't end up getting the right credential they need to get into a four-year institution.
Right.
Do we think we have enough support for them? I know,
Yeah, we definitely have enough support, and we also have the history of them in math. So we know how well they did in Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry. So those would be the classes they've already taken. If they've been sort of riding the B, C, almost D wave, then pre-calc Excel's at the right place, right? If they've been getting A's along the way, A's, B's, then that's a really good conversation to have. So it is more a conversation with the student to make sure they're taking the right class as opposed to the next class.
What are the absent votes? What do those mean?
So it's a really large group. As you can see, we have 21 people that are part of this team, and over the course of an afternoon, people have to step out. So people had a meeting, or they had to come late, or they had to leave early, or there was a crisis, or so it doesn't mean it's not a no. It's they weren't there.
So I've seen where if a student has taken college algebra here and gotten a C or better, that they still can be placed in remedial at College of DuPage.
They should not be.
But they are very stringent, and also they are very reliant upon the ALEX test score.
Yes,
I know
they
that
are.
they do ALEX testing here in college algebra throughout the course, but they are very reliant on that test score, and they don't care whether or not you took college algebra here.
Well, that's really troubling because that's a state law. And if it's coded at T002, which our course is, they must have that student in a credit-bearing course. That's a state law. That's why we have the transition program throughout the state. So that is truly troubling. I know that they are overly dependent on that ALEX score, and that's something we've talked with them a great deal. Like, look, if this is the course you've said it prepares them for the next thing, and they are showing that they can do it. And the state says if you get a C or better, you have to place them. That's if they go anywhere. If they go to COD or Marine Valley or down to SWIC in Southern Illinois, they have to take them based on that course. So that's troubling to hear.
is there a way to check that? Just to confirm through COD that they, I don't know.
Well, we've been working on a
contractual
data sharing
agreement.
agreement for a number of years, and we might actually get some data this year.
That would be tremendous to know.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was part of the group, again, why this frustrates me in particular. I was part of the group that put together that agreement with COD, and we spent hours, days on it. As you said, they don't agree with the law, and we were like, but this is what it says, this is what we're supposed to do. We can go to Moraine Valley and and we can take their class, and you have to take it. I mean, that's how it works. So, yeah, that's not good.
All right, because they make you take 2 to 3 remedial classes just to get to the credit-bearing class.
Which is why we teach the college algebra, so they don't. So they start right in the credit-bearing class.
What is that credit-bearing class that they would start out?
I
guys-
don't recall their course right off the top of my head, but it is a course that's not remedial. So they have what are called developmental classes, which are remedial classes, and they sort of reteach algebra concepts. And in some cases, if you're too behind, they reteach fractions and basic math as well.
Because if you don't go into like a science, engineering course load, usually the starting bench is calculus. That's like considered, you're
Yeah,
on
I
track.
can definitely share the pathways, because I do have that. I don't have it memorized, but there are, depending on your major
Right.
at COD, there's many different math courses that are credit-bearing. If you're looking to be, for example, a medical technician and getting a certificate that way, that's a lower bar for math.
Right.
If you're doing non-science related, you don't ever have to touch calculus. So they have different, there is sort of a college algebra, which is different than this one, but it is more, it includes more statistics and data analytics. And then they also have math for, like, if you're going into real estate and those types of things. So it is sort of tailored to some of the majors.
Majors, correct. Yeah, like business has an easier
Yep.
calculus. They have a version for
Yeah.
business students.
Yeah, there's a business calc.
So I guess I'm just curious, because there's this path of the pre-cal, I guess the prep course that leads into pre-calculus, and what you're saying is that it doesn't really merit it because those students don't end up going down the path of then pursuing calculus, or we're currently?
We just
Yeah.
we have many options.
Okay.
And really their best bet, if they are interested in moving in a science-related field, is to take pre-calculus Excel. That's going to prepare them better.
And then, is it Excel/honors, or just Excel?
Just Excel. And then there's also an honors class as well.
Okay. So there's an option, and then I guess the theory behind it is the students that are already looking into that, if they want to, they're probably getting A's and B's, so they would be fit for the Excel pre-calculus course.
Right.
Okay.
Michael, I'm curious though, because you just specifically mentioned COD, probably maybe based on experience or hearing things, but are there other colleges that you've heard similar that are not accepting that credit from our school?
I'm not sure of any others,
I'd
but
just be
I
curious,
know
like,
that there's a
and how
large
we can-
contingent that go from here, that
Yeah.
go to COD, that
Correct.
are ending up on that path and track, and who've taken college algebra here.
That is disturbing. I mean, just by itself.
And going into the
COD.
class, you're told that, oh yeah, if you take this class, you won't be in remedial.
Right,
which is
because
not
that's
true.
what the law says. So I'll be calling COD
Yeah,
tomorrow.
definitely.
Well, and
I mean,
I think
it's,
it also, like, if we could notify kids in that class, get it on their radar early too.
right.
And
Yeah.
that might be, doing what you,
Yeah.
I mean, certainly calling is
Yeah,
one
no,
thing. and
no,
then-
because I mean, that's literally what the act was all about. It was because we don't want kids paying tuition and not earning credit.
Exactly.
I mean, that,
Almost
because,
like arming our kids with that law.
Yeah,
So that when
be-
they go to COD, they have
and
that
we give
information,
them,
what
and I
might
know
be
we
good.
give them the instructions on what to do, and I know there was a problem early on if we hadn't done our final transcript with the T002 after college algebra, that if kids registered on their own, they had no record of it and they were doing some of that, but I thought we fixed that. So we'll have to look into that.
Yeah, just
again, to that point, if they're putting them into 2 extra classes and stuff, that's costing our students money and making
Yeah,
their
and,
path to
Right.
completion.
yeah,
Right, the
and
path to
already,
completion has been delayed a semester because of specifically math.
Right,
Yeah.
that's so frustrating.
and that's one of the challenges too, one of the reasons why the law came into existence is because of the very low rate of graduation at the community college and the percentage of up to 6 years to getting an associate's degree that, really wanted to cut down on. So getting kids, especially if you only need to take 1 math class, to then take 3 that you're paying for.
Exactly.
And that assumes you
Exactly.
pass all of them.
Right, right.
It's a,
When you are talking to them about data sharing, like, I'm assuming then that would be part of the report back. Like, how are our students doing?
Correct.
But yeah, okay.
and that's what we've been asking. I was able to get that data once, about 8 years ago.
We've not had that data for
It's
a long time.
it's been a while. And again, the point of it is so that we can see, are we preparing our kids right? We want to see when our kids get to COD, what classes are they in and how are they doing? And is our preparation good? And are they, or do we need to make some changes there? Because they'll share the class that they took and the grade they got in it. So, and we also want to see our pathways, because we've made some changes and we've actually made math more challenging over the years. So in that sense, they should be ready. They should be prepared. So, yeah. But in any case, with pre-calc prep, that's not necessarily the best place. Again, if they're in that science track, they should really be in the Excel class. Any
Yeah, and
other-
we wouldn't want to limit them just to the COD world, I mean, just.
Right, we have other classes too. We have probability and statistics class. And we've even had some students take the AP Econ, AP Stats. So again, it sort of depends on the interest of the student somewhat as well. But we do have other options for them beyond just the calculus track.
I mean, in terms of thinking, like a 2-year community college and a 4-year institution where the requirements are different and more demanding at a 4-year institution. So,
Yeah, and COD, to their credit, they have a
It's
partnership.
not that much different.
Go ahead.
It's not that much different.
Not a whole lot. They have a partnership with the University of Illinois that if students come in and take their advanced calculus and linear algebra and Calc 3 and get a certain grade, they are auto admits in the U of I, which is a good program, and that makes a lot of sense. But those aren't the kids we're talking about, right? So, as we look at some of those, we're like, let's look at the whole range of students that are coming.
That's good.
All right, so let me make a note about the math pathways at COD.
Dig up on that would be helpful to have.
I'll make a call tomorrow.
Thank you.
The only thing I would take onto that is, I would just, when you make a phone call to them, maybe just make sure that it's not just math, because maybe we don't have experiences like when you have a.
It's only
small
math.
What?
It's only math for this
Is
class.
that the only one that has?
It's the only one,
Okay, there's no,
no. And it's the only one,
Okay.
we've had problems with it before, so.
okay. I just didn't know if it was some of the other credit. Years.
No, there is an English transition class that's coming on board, which we haven't really looked at because of a whole lot of factors, but ultimately, the state is trying to tell us that it wouldn't count as a year of English, but it would be an English class, and you need 4 years of English to graduate, so it has to be, and so there's been some, anyway, that's a whole nother
Okay, so
conversation.
there's nothing else that would be, okay.
No, it's
I
just
was
gonna be
like,
math, yeah.
As we go through
Make the
more
most
here,
of
I
your
didn't know
time.
something else was gonna come up.
No, it's
What
just
else to get
math,
by?
it's just math.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know, because I was like, there's other
Call to
classes
put the
here.
hammer
I mean,
down.
to really get in the weeds with it, there are 3 possible transition math classes. So I mentioned T002. That's the one that's for non-science majors. There's also a T001, which is for sort of even pre-math. It's more just get me into whatever, and that's all in that pathway document I can show you.
Great.
But we only, and most schools in the state are just focusing on that intermediate T002 transition class, so.
They have to do that for other schools then as well.
Yeah, yeah, and, you know, when we've had those meetings, my counterpart at the other district, 204, and at Lake Park, and at Downers, and, you know, we had lengthy conversations to try and make sure it works, so. Make sure, keep making sure.
Yeah, yeah. Doing our part, they need to do their part.
Yep. So that's the math part. The next group is in language arts, and you'll notice there's a number of them for media arts. What we've had in the past, and by media arts, we're really talking about LTTV, we've had opportunities for kids to retake LTTV, and Bill Allen, the instructor, gives them basically a new curriculum every time. So a kid will take TV production as a freshman, they can commute over and do it, then they'll do it again sophomore year, and then they'll do it junior year, and they'll do it senior year, and Bill gives them a different curriculum each time. And there's usually 3 or 4, maybe 5 kids in each of those levels. Well, as we've been looking at our career pathways in film and television broadcasting, there are a number of different courses, and Bill's already teaching them all, right? So all we're doing is naming them so that the student can graduate with a pathway endorsement. As it is, our students are graduating here who do this, who are going to college and finding that there's not a whole lot for them to do right away, that they need, you know, they tend to be running the TV station within a year of going to their college campuses. So what this would do would add these additional classes, and they're pretty fascinating classes. You have the television broadcasting, social media is one of them, and so each of them has a different focus. So included in your packet is the list of all the different courses. The proposal itself had a hyperlink, but obviously that doesn't work in a PDF. So you can see those listed there on page 18. So the beginning class is truly beginner, how to do basic things. The intermediate, they are doing a lot more live and studio productions. The production 3 really is team-based and doing specific broadcasting in different situations and doing their FCC tests. The television broadcasting, they're really doing things for live productions, including trying to do TV shows. We haven't done much with television shows. Our studio is really small, and so we've got some corners sort of staked out to look like a TV set. When you go in there, like, what is this? Then you see it on TV, you're like, wow, this is really cool.
Could be big.
And then lastly is the social media. So a lot of it has to do with all the making really good social media production. So it's really a complete top to bottom program, which again, we already have. It's just codifying it, and it looks on a transcript, instead of the kid taking the same class over and over and over, they're taking a progression of courses and earning an endorsement. So.
Well, I'll just say, having had a lot of close experience with this, I love that progression, because it does, otherwise, that's what I was saying, otherwise it just looks like you took the same class over and over again, and you kind of have to explain it or hope that they're familiar with, you know, your school's familiar. But I can say just the first day in a classroom, my son called Bill Allen and was like, thank you, because I'm so well prepared. They just get to do so much here. So
Yeah.
I like that it's differentiated too.
Mm-hmm.
And so that those kids that want to continue on, it'll help them stand out even more.
Yep, and we're also looking to see if we can get some dual credit for them as well,
Right.
which is always a challenge, just because it is kind of niche. It's not like even the community colleges are doing as much. So,
So like with that in mind, is that where you look to partner with another school that has,
yeah, we've done those things. That's why we have dual credit with Triton and Marine Valley and Indiana University and even Embry-Riddle Aeronautical. So there are lots of rules about doing that, but I've navigated them before, so we can take a look at that.
I think there'd be some good opportunity too, even with some of our local colleges here
Mhm.
in Chicago.
Yeah, it all comes down to the certification of our instructor. He doesn't have a master's in television broadcasting, but nobody really does. So, but he has the professional experience having worked in Comcast, and then obviously probably 18 years here at least teaching. So, and just thousands of shoots and 2 student Emmy Award winners and all that kind of stuff.
That's
So, a lot of good bragging we can do about our television program.
Good stuff.
So I showed you that whole big process for how a proposal comes to the board. This one is different. The Spanish language arts course, Lectoescritura, is something we've been discussing for a bit and really trying to find other schools, how they've done it. It is a requirement of a multilingual program to have a Spanish language arts class. So all of our Spanish-speaking multilingual students are required to take Spanish language arts. It can count for an English class. It does not count for a language class. In fact, the standards that the course is built on are not language learning standards. They are English Common Core standards. So ultimately, it's an English class in Spanish, right? If you were to go to any Spanish-speaking country and go to their class, it's not learning the grammar, it's the literature and the writing and that. So we were planning on proposing this for the following year, not this year, but as we went through an audit of our multilingual program, they said you need to have this. We said, well, we're covering it through our Spanish for Heritage Speakers course, and they said, no, you can't do that because that's a language class. So we've sort of looked around at some other schools, kind of seen how others have done it, looked at schools that had larger multilingual Spanish speaking populations, and ultimately have sort of coalesced around this particular course. There are still some things we're not sure about, and again, we've been working with a consultant from the state, and we believe what we have here is the right course. It's just a question of how frequently can a student take it, and we're leaning toward once, but it sort of depends on when you take it based on where you are in your multilingual journey. So. And whether students who exited program, say 5th grade, could take it if they wanted to because they are fluent in Spanish at home and on their own. So, so we do have it as a course that's offered 9th through 12th grade. The prerequisite is native Spanish proficiency. So we would offer it at either campus. And any student, even if you aren't a native Spanish speaker who can show native Spanish proficiency, could take the course. If a student does take it who is still in a multilingual course, so the ESL 1 intermediate, beginning, or advanced, they still have to take that class too. So they would have to take them at the same time. But in any case, this would follow the Common Core English, and would be taught by a bilingual certified teacher.
So this is just sort of like an ELA class, but not really, because ELA students take more than 1 year, and it's progressive.
Yeah, so it's an ELA class taught entirely in Spanish, but what does count for 1 year of high school English credit.
So do those students that take the Spanish language arts for that 1 year, they don't have to take ELA in English?
They don't have to unless they are in an EL student and still have not exited from the bilingual program. So then they would also still have to take the ESL class, either beginning, intermediate, or advanced.
So for the students that graduated, this would replace an English ELA
Yes.
class? But it's only 1 year that they
Correct.
would take anywhere between 9th through 12th grade.
Correct.
So what does that look like for that student to pick back up into the ELA courses then?
I don't know. We've never seen this before, and we've never offered it before.
Well, no, that's fine. I mean, that's why I'm asking all these questions.
Yeah.
And then, I'm curious about that. And then, how are the students, I mean, considering our, working backwards, the District 102, I mean, I've seen what their, Spanish heritage classes are like. I don't believe that it would prepare them for such a course. So how are we going to get these students prepared? Because,
Well, I think that,
I
I
mean-
think that the way they're designing the class,
Yeah.
it will have the same rigor. In our English classes, they're not like, it's not like they're sequential. So when kids have choice throughout,
Right.
so like students can take a different type of literature class. So I think we have really focused on maintaining the high rigor in our ML classes. And I would say that some of our students are like really excelling and exceeding.
Right.
So I would say that the teachers there, that it's an English class that's going to be taught in, so you might be reading Camus, but you might be reading it in Spanish. So that,
Right.
so the literature, it's all going to be at that same high rigorous level.
right.
that what-
No, that's not my question. Your point is well taken, and I agree. That's awesome. But again, that's here. You control what happens at LT. And I get that the rigor is here, and that's awesome. But this is a class that's offered 9th through 12th. So my question is, how are the students entering 9th grade prepared for this level of rigor? Because it doesn't currently exist really at our feeder schools, District
Right,
102.
and I
At
would
least
say
that's what, from what I gathered and what I've seen, looking at language immersion and all of that. I mean, it's one of my passions that I've really looked at closely. So just observation-wise, I just feel like this definitely sounds like an awesome class. I'm just curious about how well-prepared students are going to be. That's all.
Right.
Especially for 9th grade.
Right, and I think for 9th grade, the student would definitely have to demonstrate their linguistic fluency at that level. And so we've had students who moved here from other countries. It would be perfect for them.
Yes.
We have students who are coming up in full bilingual courses, so they're doing bilingual English and Spanish. It would fit them because they've been in a bilingual program since kindergarten. So that 9th grade is really an option for those students for whom they're ready. Probably the target group for me would be juniors, and for the specific reason, if a student comes in and takes Spanish for heritage speakers, heritage learners, and then takes the second one, which you'll see we have a proposal to split
Right.
that, then that's always the debate. Do you then go to the college, Indiana University dual credit courses? Do you go to AP? Do you go to Spanish 5? And most of our heritage students don't feel that's for them. They feel that's much more Castilian Spanish. They believe that's much more book learning Spanish and grammar as opposed to culture and more spoken language. So we see this as a stepping stone after that. And you'll also notice we're looking to add in the language side, film as literature course in Spanish. So this will give students options, where right now what they have is, literally right now, we have one class, and it's Spanish for heritage speakers, and you take it twice, and it's a 2-year curriculum, so it alternates. So
Right.
what that means is you can't build from one year to the next. You have this curriculum, which is separate from that curriculum. So the kids sort of jump in either here or there, and they do it for 2 years.
Okay.
And then they have to make a choice for Spanish. Do they go, are they good enough to do Spanish 4 or AP or jump all the way into Spanish 5? It's been a challenge trying to find the best path. So not only does this Spanish language arts sort of solve one of those problems, it meets that EL bilingual requirement, and then also just gives us some more flexibility for placement.
Okay, no, I think it's awesome that we have this wide range of opportunities and to meet, every student's needs. So I think that's really good, and thank you for expounding on that.
Sure.
What would be the difference between this Spanish language arts class and the pathway for the Spanish heritage students that would go into Spanish 4, I think? I can't remember
Right.
all the names of the courses you just mentioned, but how would they choose between a course like this and, the subsequent
So
after?
they could do both, right? They
Oh,
could
okay.
take Spanish 4, because that's a language class,
Okay.
and take this as a literature class.
Oh,
right?
okay.
Or they could just take this for a year and take another elective, because they don't have the room for multiple languages. I mean, that's one of the challenges. Any student who takes 4 years of a language, you have to lose access to other electives. So again, it gives students more options. They can then work on a different pathway. They can take, junior year, there are more elective options, and so students often want to try different things. And then through EOS, we've been recommending students take that AP class or take a dual credit class. So this would allow them to do some of that as well and keep their language skills up.
Okay, thank you. It's awesome, thank you.
It's a lot of choices.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
can
that's
see
great.
why it's been hard trying to figure out where it fits and how it fits.
Yeah, no, I felt that
And
challenge.
what we've seen is some high schools, for their heritage students, rather than having a heritage class, they'll do, they'll do the heritage 1, 2, and then they do AP 3, 4. And sometimes they do Spanish language arts earlier in that progression as well. So it's kind of all over the place. And
Okay.
we've asked the state for model programs, and we've not been shown any.
No, I think this is great, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of people that get intimidated, just because you're Latino or you're Spanish speaking, people think that you may have that proficiency, which you don't. And so then there's the other handful of students, like you said, that are foreign students transferred where they need something like this.
Right.
So I think it's great.
I mean, this won't be easy. This is a similar to an English class, so it has composition, has writing.
Oh, I
It's,
know.
you know, it's,
Yeah, no,
it's
that's-
like writing
It's the real deal.
the literary
Yeah.
analysis, but reading in Spanish, writing in Spanish, right?
Yeah,
The whole thing.
no, I think that's awesome. Thank you.
Jill, you had a
Thank you so
question?
much. Yeah, I did have a question. So, I appreciate all the explanation, but when the second sentence that you have, this course is recommended for students who are identified as multilingual learners, I would like you to clarify that just to be Spanish. Because there's many students you have that are multilingual learners.
Correct.
Just, to
It-
clarify who that would be.
Sure, so-
Spanish speaking.
So we've made the change, and this is the challenge, I think, in the English learner world. We used to be called ELs, English learners, and then English language learners, and then bilingual or multilingual. When they were bilingual, people speak more than one language. So the new term is multilingual,
But only in the Spanish language.
but for this class, it has to be native Spanish proficiency.
So I just
So
need to
that's in the
clarify that a little bit
prerequisite.
more.
Yeah,
That
that's
would
in
be
the
my-
prerequisite.
Okay, that was just my only.
Yeah, so it's called Spanish Language Arts. We even debated, this is how nerdy we got about it. So lectoescritura is the name of is the Spanish term for Spanish Language Arts. And we thought about not even having an English version at all, that it not even be mentioned as an English course. So you would need to know Spanish to know the course
Well,
even
that's, I just want
exists.
to it doesn't seem in this summary.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand the intention that it is
Sure.
in the first sentence, but just to clarify it, I just think,
Yeah.
maybe under the prereq or something, but you said it was.
It's right there.
Yeah,
No, but that sentence, though, doesn't say that. The second sentence. It says, this course is recommended for students who are identified as multilingual learners and in the future, those who have exited dual language programs.
Where are you looking?
Well, in the summary, she's probably got
Yeah.
that.
I'm on
Yeah.
the summary,
I'm getting down to it.
Okay.
right here.
Oh, okay, you're
Because
on
I
the
was
actual
looking
form.
at the
Okay,
No,
detail.
I'm
you're on
looking at the
summary,
summary,
okay.
because I think that summary needs to be tidied up.
yeah, I'll fix
Yeah.
it, because And again, like I said, we've had multiple drafts. In the actual proposal itself, because we have more than 20 multilingual Spanish-speaking students, we are
Yeah.
required to offer Spanish.
Right, but I just think in your summary, if this is like, you know what I mean, I just think that needs to be.
I'll
checked
fix
out.
it, because
Okay,
that's
perfect.
an error.
Thank you.
Yeah. What page was that on?
It's on page 5, I
Five.
think,
Oh,
of the
sorry, the
packet. Yeah,
summary,
yeah.
it's the second.
Well, no, I wanted to know because what I read was, I wanted to know where you were reading, because it says here, because we have more than 20 multilingual Spanish-speaking
It's a-
At the
students.
bottom of that paragraph.
So,
So it's the-
okay.
It's the second sentence of
Courses
that
are
paragraph.
recommended for students.
Course.
Or
What's
third
on
sentence,
page
sorry.
5 doesn't match what's in the
Oh.
proposal,
Yeah.
so we
Right.
need to fix that.
Like
Yep.
you have, you're looking at the detailed version,
Yeah.
and she was looking at the
Yeah.
compressed
Right, I just
version.
think that needed to be.
So
okay.
we'll
Okay.
get that
No, I
corrected.
just wanted to see the two different versions, that's all. Okay.
All right. Moving on to art. So we've made a lot of changes in art over the years. We used to have a darkroom photography and very analog, and we've moved much more towards digital. And the interest is huge. Kids are very interested in graphic art and graphic design. So what this proposal is to offer graphic design at South. Right now, it's only available at North. And then that would allow them to have more of a chance to take some other digital art electives, digital photo art, animation, and then also add a new course, graphic design advanced. And that's something that they would be able to do, which also would lead towards the studio art AP option as well. So this is the one area of the arts where we don't have a multi-tiered pathway. We do for jewelry and metalsmithing and 2D, 3D ceramics, drawing, painting, but we don't for graphic design, and it's extremely popular. So this would be, that's the proposal for art. All right, that was an easy one.
Great.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
The next one is, I've already sort of hinted at, in the world language area, Spanish for Heritage Learners was repeatable, so you remember how I explained that. So the proposal is to split it, so we would have Spanish for Heritage Learners 1, Spanish for Heritage Learners 2. Both of them earn dual credit through College of DuPage. A student can come in and start, and we can restructure the course so that it becomes more of an introductory course. Right now, we have a mix of students in that class, so we have some students who are fairly proficient in Spanish, reading, writing, speaking, and listening, and we have others who are who speak Spanish at home but don't have the grammatical background perhaps that some others do. So by splitting it, we can tailor the course better to where the students come in. There is a desire to have a placement test for Spanish 2 if you want to skip Spanish 1, and that's totally fine. That's something we do with our other languages as well. And so that would then give a really clear pathway with the third class in fine arts being proposed, Latin American cinema. So this one would, you would finish, after you do finish Spanish for Heritage, you could take Latin American cinema, and that would be all films in Spanish, and it would be, it would align with the AP Spanish Literature and Composition course. So again, unlike the one we just talked about, there is a Spanish AP for literature, and watching the films and analyzing the films as AP literature would qualify them to take the test. It wouldn't be an AP course, but they would be able to take the test. Anybody can take any AP test they want, and the desire would be to prepare students to do that. So it is possible then for a student who, let's say, starts in Heritage 1 and Heritage 2 and Latin American cinema and takes the AP language class, all of those are in college credit. So they would be able to get 12 hours through COD and then the score on the AP test. So students would be almost at a minor in Spanish going to college. So we think that's a real benefit to kids, and if you throw in then the Spanish language arts class, there's a real path for kids to really demonstrate a solid background in that area. And our instructor has experience seeing another school that's done the Latin American cinema course, and he's super excited about it. Yes?
The only thing I would ask on the first sentence that you have in that summary, the same one I was referring to previously, by having a third level of heritage, students will be able to acquire more knowledge about their culture, but you might not have you might have a Spanish-speaking student that this might not be their culture. So I think I would like to see it not have that assumption, but maybe more knowledge about the Latin American culture.
Sure.
Kind of answered my question about, like, I was trying to figure out if you're in a path, you know, for, like, especially as we get into these, like, the cinema, and having that as another elective or another option for our students. I can see a lot of our students that have been following along a progressive path of Spanish coursework really wanting to take that class. So you're right, like,
Or it could
they
be a
may not
multilingual
be.
student that's from Spain, that wouldn't be their
Right.
culture.
True, true.
So that was kind of where, you know what I mean, thinking.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't want to make that assumption that anybody in that class, it would be their culture.
Valid.
Thanks.
Sure. All right. Moving on to global studies. We've had for years international foods, and the great thing about international foods is kids learn different recipes from all around the world. Having formerly taught first period, it was always fun for kids to, or second period, kids would have international foods first period, and they would bring pierogies to my class second period, or whatever it happened to be. It was a little early for pierogi, but that was all right.
It's never too early.
Never too early for pierogies. The only thing is we've looked at the pathways with our culinary 1 and 2. There were really no new skills taught. There are really currently no new skills taught in the international foods class. There aren't different knife skills, there aren't different preparation skills. It's really just new recipes and practicing the old skills. The one thing we've never had is a baking and pastry course. That's a very common course in high schools. It's something that to do a true pathway in culinary you need as well. It's something that if you go to Technology Center DuPage, they've got an amazing baking and pastry program. We have some kids that want to go there, but they can't get there because it takes 3 periods a day and whatnot. So we felt this would be a good change. It would be obviously totally new skills. Baking and pastry is a challenging course. I'm not a good baker because you actually have to be precise when you cook. I like to throw things together. But this would be something that would then also lead to potential dual credit as well. And then there's also, they have a pastry arts pathway at COD that our students currently aren't able to access at a higher level. They'd have to start at the beginning. So this would get them in the front.
So it looks like the international foods really wasn't leading anywhere per se, so it
Yeah,
kind
it
of
was-
made just sense to.
It was a good class. You learned, different recipes and different cultures and food cultures, but when we sort of got down to the skills and in order to have a pathway, you need to have skill progression and skill development.
Right.
There was nothing new coming in. It was really, now we'll do something Hungarian, now we'll do something Mexican, now we'll do something Polish, and Asian. So it was just more of a different recipe, more cooking than culinary.
So how was the enrollment level? Like, what was the interest like for the students?
It's been popular. I mean, there's no doubt about it because we only have 4 culinary classes. We have 1 and 2, and if you take them both at South and they're a semester long, international would be the next one, but then chefs is a whole year. So for a lot of kids, they would take international. We feel they'll still take the pastry.
I guess it sounds like such a cool class. And, I mean, what is the rationale for dropping if you have the enrollment? I mean, granted, I know it's not, it looks like the baking and pastry arts is it almost sounds like, is it because it's competing for resources, or why couldn't you
No,
keep?
it's for the pathways. So, and the purpose of a pathway is for a student to graduate with an endorsement, right? So, again, we can offer tons of cool classes, but what we're looking at our catalog lately is what are the things that don't really fit as far as taking a kid to the next level. So if you do Culinary 1, Culinary 2, International Foods and Chefs, you don't have baking and pastry in your repertoire. And that third class hasn't really prepared you any better for the chef's class, and it's not a requirement of the chef's class. So you've already learned all the knife skills prior to International Foods. You've already learned sautéing and frying and all the different cooking methods. So really, it's just applying them other ways. So what they were talking about doing is looking at the recipes in International Foods and sort of backfilling them into Culinary 1 and 2, so that kids can have a broader sense of international food along the way. And so that they, some of them are really popular recipes anyway, so just sort of backfilling them earlier so they can practice it there. So
That's
that was
pretty
kind of their
cool.
thought.
So there's a happy medium to somehow
Yep.
fill in what's already enjoyed. Sometimes, students don't necessarily want a pathway for every single class they take.
True.
They need stress relievers and something. So that is cool that you're able to work it into the Culinary 1. So then the Culinary 1 and 2 classes, the curriculum is sort of changing, or?
Well, they would just change the recipes.
The
So,
recipes, okay.
that would be like changing out a novel or
Okay.
changing out,
Not a big
unit.
deal, it's
Not a big
easily-
deal. They
okay,
just buy different ingredients and
Okay.
give them a new recipe.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep.
I appreciate that they surveyed the students too.
Yeah.
So you know
Yeah.
that you've got a nice group of kids that are interested.
And Scott, with the talk about it being dual credit, is that how does that fall into the process of then this course being offered for fall of '25? So
Well-
is that something that can be solidified?
It can be to an extent. We have to make sure that enough instructors are dual credit eligible. And usually that means you have to, in the career tech area, you need to have 60 or more hours in that field. So you would need to have worked in a
Sure.
bakery or worked in a commercial kitchen, those kinds of things. Usually we haven't had a problem with that, but it's not always the case. So some of our courses, we'd love to have dual credit, but we don't have people who have sort of the medical background for the healthcare careers and those kinds of things. So we're trying to work through a lot of those things.
Okay, so that would be something that we'd be looking for, from a hiring standpoint, or going through who we've got existing?
Well, that's the tricky thing too, because we aren't able to just hire somebody
Right,
for it.
just
So we've
for
got to
this,
see who's on
exactly.
staff. What'll often happen, and I know there are, because of the interest in baking and pastry, we have teachers who are willing to go and do the classes they need to do. Sometimes in CTE, accounting, for example, COD wants to make sure our teacher has taken their accounting class before they teach the dual credit. So we've done that with some programming classes as well. So it would be an opportunity to take the baking class, the baking and pastry over the summer at COD and get a sense of what it looks like. and
Yeah, I think that would
follow
really be worthwhile to do.
Yeah. We might need some new equipment, some big Hobart mixers and all that kind of stuff, but
True. That was something
always,
to go with that.
always, that's where I get excited. We use the CTE Perkins money and we buy new equipment that's cool,
Right. Exciting to use.
that the people on the loading dock hate. That's usually how it works.
Just a point of clarification, isn't there like a state law or mandate that we need to have career pathways?
Phew.
And by,
Thank you.
like, what date is that, or year, and how many?
So it's a stair-step process, how many you need to have. We have enough on the books to meet the requirement to the end of the requirement. So we have 5 already. We're looking to add 2 more next year, or this year, and then this would be an opportunity for a third on top of that. So it's when we're the only school in the state that has an aviation pathway. And, you know, so we're in good shape with the pathways. We're started out with the teaching internship and teaching, and that's the next proposal, to make that a little clearer as well. And then we've added programming and business and the aviation I mentioned, and what was the other one? There was a fifth one.
Radio?
Yeah.
TV radio?
Nope, not yet, because
Oh,
that'll
that's
be
next
this year.
That's next year.
There's another one, I can't remember.
So
Is it culinary?
Yeah, you
With
did
chefs?
mention
So we already have
culinary.
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 Okay.
so is the pathway different than the endorsement?
So the pathway leads to an endorsement, so you can get an endorsement in that specific pathway.
Okay, so it all goes together.
Yeah, that all goes together.
I'll share that list though with you guys this week,
Yeah.
with kind of what we've been approved so far and what the plans are for this year too. I can put that in the weekly update.
So for early childhood internship, we have two internships. We have a teaching internship elementary and an early childhood internship. What we're finding is, for our students, we don't have huge numbers in either. And by keeping them separate, we're not able to run a full year of the internship at the elementary level, which earns 6 college credits. Teaching internship 1 and teaching internship 2. The early childhood education internship is more preschool, but again, in the high school level, there's really no need to specialize that early. And we have partnerships with our elementary feeder districts where the kids go out to work. So, again, looking at that pathway and trying to get more students to be able to complete it and actually have the course run, because we've not been able to do the full elementary course, we want to make this change here. So we would drop the early childhood internship. We can tailor it in the elementary internship for someone who has more of a penchant for early childhood and find a kindergarten classroom, find a classroom that would fit more with where they're thinking. But rather than running two sort of competing programs, pushing them together. All right.
So, I know that, well, I don't know, I'm gonna ask. The students that do the early childhood, don't they work with the preschool?
Mhm.
Here, so then what does that do? Will that be impacted at all? Thank you, I couldn't think of the name.
Yeah, Little Lions preschool.
Oh,
The little-
that still happens, because that's part of child development. And
Okay,
so
separate,
So
okay.
they will have already, that was another, I'm glad you brought that up. That's another consideration that the teachers had, was like, well, they've already worked with kids at this age level.
Got it, okay.
So they should get a chance to work with some older kids too.
Okay.
So when they go to a college program, they have a better sense of the range of
So that
development.
doesn't go away.
That won't, yeah.
No, that won't go away.
And they'll still be exposed
Dr.
to
Trell
that.
won't let it happen.
No way.
All right.
All right, so now we are in the next one, computer concepts and software applications, which is our old keyboarding. Couple things, not that there's anything wrong with keyboarding, but as we've had these debates about it, the state, again with pathways, they've placed keyboarding as a pre-high school skill, that it's learning how to type. It's not unlike learning how to read or learning how to, do some of the basic things that are a part of what your next class is all about. Our partner at Technology Center of DuPage, they oversee all of the career tech ed through the DEOS board, and the person over there, Mr. Zimmerman, who oversees that, has said, look, keyboarding doesn't count anymore. It's not going to count for funding. It doesn't count in your pathway. It doesn't count as that orientation course that you want it to. And we've had all along a sort of second course in that sequence on Microsoft operating system, so kids learn Outlook and Word and Excel and PowerPoint. So by making this shift to computer concepts and software applications and focusing on the Google Suite, they can still learn how to type and practice their typing, their keyboarding. But they're also learning the Google Suite along with it. And what we're learning, we've now been one-to-one for a while. The students don't really know all the tips and tricks that go along with using Google and the Google Suite. So this would give them an opportunity to learn how to use the tools in all of their classes a little better. It would also it would also continue the dual credit. Keyboarding has been a dual credit course. It would continue under this name. The teachers aren't in love with this name. It's certainly different than keyboarding, right? But I think we just have to clarify to kids and as part of the course description that there's an understanding that this is actually for the best for them, and also it'll look better on a transcript, and it also helps in that more than one pathway. So this can lead in part of the engineering pathway as well as the business and computer programming pathways. It's a course that straddles all of those. So
How popular is keyboarding?
more popular than I'm surprised how popular it is.
Yeah.
Do you know how
I'm a
many,
little
roughly
surprised
how many
myself.
sections of keyboarding?
I can tell you right now.
Popular one
It's a
that
very-
summer before you get here, like for
Oh.
kids.
It used to be a
Okay.
prerequisite
'Cause it
for a
says
lot of
9 through
things,
12.
but again, as students, but that was 20 years ago. Now it's more, you're assuming kids know how to type, but you've watched your children type sometime.
It's a prereq, keyboarding has been a prereq for some of the computer science courses too.
Not
hasn't
anymore.
it? But it used to be,
It used
just
to
like
be.
last year.
Yeah,
We
Yeah.
have,
like a long time ago.
we
How
have
many
eight,
sections?
8 sections of
Oh, I
it,
saw it
which
last
seems like a lot. It
year.
has dropped a lot from what Scott has
Yeah.
said.
Yeah, it used to be, we used to have 10, 12, 14
Yeah,
sections.
and it's essentially entirely a South Campus class. We do generally run 1 to 2 sections over at North Campus each year. This year, we only have 1 section at North Campus.
Yeah, Scott, can you take a look at the book? I remember looking last year when we were choosing classes for this curriculum, and that's why it popped in my head, because it did look like it was a requirement, and that could have been already corrected maybe with this year's. I don't know, but I remember sort of seeing it.
I believe
Yeah.
it says keyboarding skills. It is not a prerequisite for anything.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
But
So I even
I'll
had
definitely double check.
Right, because I even had a discussion with our counselor about that. Either way, I mean, it seems like, this seems like a good change, and all you're doing is combining courses is what it looks like, or expounding on it.
Small engines. In our small engines course, students are getting college credit. This has been our only dual credit class at level 3. So the instructors have said, they're earning college credit, they should be getting level 4 credit. So that's what we do with our other CTE courses, so that's the change there. Nothing too major. All right, and the last one, credit, no credit. So, our credit, no credit, currently, we have a small number of courses where students can choose not to get a grade. That credit, no credit option was originally designed way before my time, when a couple things happened. We used to only have a 7-period day. We now have an 8-period day. So students weren't able to take as many classes as they can now. There was a state requirement that students take creative and practical arts. And so we had a creative art requirement and a practical art requirement. And for students who, for example, were very involved in music and taking languages, they never had room in their schedule for a practical art class. So they would create that space. The desire was so that they didn't feel pressured, that they didn't have to take it for a grade. So they would take it for a credit, no credit. So if you got a C- or better, you would get a credit. If you were lower than that, you got no credit. It was extremely popular when we had class rank. It was a way to sort of take a number off of your denominator in determining your class rank. And so students would take one every single semester that they could, and maximize those out to maximize their GPA. Taking away that class rank sort of lost that sort of gain. We also added civics, and when we added civics, we eliminated the requirement to take creative and practical arts. So that meant that students weren't sort of out of their comfort zone taking courses, and so fewer and fewer kids were taking creative or credit, no credit then as well. And then to top it all off, more and more of our classes ended up getting dual credit, and we moved the credits. So we have fewer, the way most of our elective pathways go, the first class, the introductory class, is level 3, the next one's level 4, and then there are often level 5s or opportunities to earn higher credit through AP. So we've sort of diminished the purpose of credit, no credit. And you can see in the proposal that the actual number of students taking credit, no credit classes has gone down every year, even since 2019. So fewer and fewer students are doing it. With a couple of exceptions, special education uses it. I didn't include that here, but we do use that in particular in classes that are IEP based and are entirely focused on students meeting their goals. We're not going to grade them on that. We're going to make sure they're getting the credit based on their goals. This is true in our LIFE program and some of those programs. And in PE, where we don't give a grade if a student's on athletic study hall. So those would continue as being given credits, but we're looking to eliminate all of the rest as far as credit, no credit goes. These are things, again, like you can see that fewer and fewer students are taking, and I guess there's a possibility a student might choose to take a different class if we make this change, but from 2023, that first semester, we were under 60 kids in total out of nearly 4,000. So it's become something of a rarity. Along the way, two other things have happened in the short term. One is because of the pandemic, many high schools gave credits instead of Fs. So what many colleges are doing now is they're converting that credit to a D. That's been true of California schools for a long time, and we always caution kids when they did credit, no credit, that if you're going to look at a California school, it's going to count as a D. The other thing that's happened just recently, and by recently I mean in the last 6 months, the NCAA is counting credit as a D as well. And I believe I mentioned a little bit of that at our last meeting, and that's what I'm talking about wanting to give that grade for the geometry class, the honors geometry class. We talked about that in June. That's become problematic. So our student athletes last year who got that algebra credit from 8th grade were having it count as a D, and the NCAA would not budge on that. So our athletes who graduated last year have Ds on their transcripts for the algebra they did as 8th graders because of the credit we gave them. So all those things, this concept of credit, no credit, while you might talk to some parents who went to school here, will tell you all the benefits. We've lost all the benefits. And we've actually made up for a lot of that through the way we've sequenced our courses. And really, it's something that's time really has come. And again, with those exceptions in special ed and PE, we really think it's time to remove it as an option. We also don't see other schools offering it. It's a uniquely LT phenomenon. particularly when we had 5 levels. When we had 5 levels of classes, this was considered the only way to survive taking a lower level class if you were a high achieving student. That's all in quotes.
Thanks for
That's not-
walking through.
Yeah, it's a lot.
There's a lot of
It's a
pieces
big-
to it.
yeah, it's a
There
big-
are, but it, it all builds one
Uh-huh.
after the next, so this, it makes a lot
Well,
of
and it
sense.
didn't seem to be hurting anybody, but now it is, and that's the biggest, my biggest
Right.
concern. I mean, in fact, I had one of our teachers whose son is going to be playing not professional, college football, came to say, you've got to do something about this. I said, it's actually on the board agenda coming up next week. So, yeah, she goes, it's fine. I mean, my son did great, and his grades are fine, but they are counting that 8th grade algebra as a D. So we also have to, and we've communicated with our associate schools, we need to stop that practice of giving that credit when students come over. We've also been given caution, though, if we go back and change transcripts that currently have it on there, that the NCAA might consider that a rules violation. So we haven't put it on the transcripts of current freshmen, and we're not going to, and we won't do it going forward. And again, all sorts of communication we want to get out about that, so people understand why. We're not taking anything away. You're still going to be placed at the next highest course in the sequence. And colleges, and Mr. Daly in the College Career Center will tell you as well, the colleges care where you land, not where you start. And so if you took that Spanish in 8th grade and you ended up in Spanish 5, that they care that you made it to Spanish 5. If you took algebra in 8th grade and you make it to Calc BC, they care more about the Calc BC than the 8th grade. So again, we're just sort of cleaning something up that its time has gone. We've been talking about it for years, and finally we're like, okay, this is it. We gotta do this.
So then, yeah, how does that affect the kids then that are enrolled for this year and?
They
to
just
change
need
this
to know
policy?
that if they're going to be going into the NCAA,
Okay.
they'll be counted that way. It just is. But and again, I would like to do a little more digging and talk to someone rather than just hear from someone that the NCAA would consider it a violation. But if we make this a school-wide elimination, then going back and just taking it off the transcript, I don't think there's any harm in that. But I also know how the NCAA plays, and they don't play, and so
Right.
I want to make sure the answer
that's-
is clear, crystal clear, and in writing, honestly. But
I'm trying to think, are there any other schools that we have examples of who've done this, who've then removed it? I mean, you're saying we don't have any schools that do this, but
They
like
really
anything
don't, yeah.
recently that you can, like what those
So-
effects have been making that change? It seems like a pretty significant shift.
So again, most of the schools that have used a credit have used it for post-pandemic grades for kids who they don't want to give
Post-temporary.
Fs to, right? We used a P for pass. We didn't use a credit because we already had a credit. And then on our transcript, it explained what the P meant. And so, but we've now flown through that those kids are gone, right? So we don't have to worry about that anymore. But yeah, but it still is sort of a vestige of that.
And how would we communicate this? Just that it would show up in the academic program guide? Would we want to be talking about this in any?
No, we would want to do something. I mean, we'll make more of a very clear message,
Okay.
probably for sure. The principals, communication. We can figure out the best way to do it. We want to just make sure. I mean, definitely it'll be in the APG as well, but we just want people to understand the why
Right,
behind it too.
that's what I'm thinking.
Because
There's gotta be
it's way
more.
more than, oh my gosh, they took something away. It's like,
Right,
well,
right. And given that we
there's a
have
couple layers to it.
so many parents too who are graduates of LT
Correct.
and understand, to your point, like there was obviously some really good reasons why, and there
Sure.
were benefits to your point, so.
It had many benefits, giving
Yeah.
those credit.
Got to get ahead of that and explain it.
Keyboarding. It was.
There you go, see? All right, so those are the proposals. Thank you for your time and your questions. I'll get back to you on the ones you still have. We'll bring these back for a second reading at the board meeting in 2 weeks. for vote, and we can get started getting out everything ready to go for next year, believe it or not, because that's, as you noticed, all of my things are for next year tonight.
Sure.
Well, not one thing. The next thing is for this year.
Oh, that's right, this one is,
You're not
next,
done.
Don't get
next
ahead.
time it'll be the one
Yeah.
after.
Well, that's a good segue. Would you like to just continue and talk
Sure.
about the 24-25 school year calendar amendment recommendation?
So, as you're all well aware, we are now an ACT state. What that means is we're no longer giving the SAT. What that also means is it's a different test administration. And so we built our calendar because we didn't know when we built our calendar a year ago that we would be making a change to ACT. We need to change our calendar so that we can best give the test in the facilities that we have and meet the needs of our specific students. So the proposal is to make this change, to make a shift in April for the test to be, as it says, on April 10th, the sophomores will take the pre-ACT 10 test at South Campus in the classrooms. Freshmen, sophomore, and junior extended time testers, and we're learning more about the test. These will only be the students who are double time, not time and a half. Time and a half kids can finish the test in one day, but if you're double time or more, you have to take it over 2 days. We don't have enough space at North for the juniors to do that in a private space while class is in session. But with sophomores taking the test at South, we have enough classrooms because the freshmen won't be in attendance for them to be bussed over, start their day there, take that class, or take that test, and then the following day finish their test. So, so the sophomores will take the pre-ACT 10, class as normal at North Campus, except for those students who have twice the time or longer to do their tests. The next day then, on April 11th, freshmen will take the pre-ACT 9 at South, and juniors will take the ACT at North in classrooms. This is a computer-based test, so they will be using their laptops. And again, we found that's a better administration in classrooms rather than in gyms. We have bought a lot of extra power strips and all that kind of stuff, so if kids need to. So that's the recommendation, is to make that change for ACT.
It's just different dates though, right?
Yeah, the 10th and the 11th.
This would come back on the 16th as well for.
Okay. Pretty straightforward.
Yep, and we'll get that out to the,
Also not to be confused with next year's calendar, which you will see on the
Wait.
16th as well.
That's what it was, okay.
First draft, though, first reading.
Oh, gosh, that's gonna get confusing.
All right.
Okay,
that's the plan.
Well, thank you.
and good luck on ACT.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right, so we can move on to finance. Thanks. So the first item is fiscal year's 25 tentative budget. Brian Station.
Thank you, President Gretsch. Good evening, everyone. Just a quick update for you on the FY25 budget. Since we reviewed this last month at the August Committee of the Whole meeting and then adopted the tentative budget, there have not been many changes. However, I can tell you there has been one change that actually has a major impact on our budget, and that is the loss of $1 million from what we had originally budgeted in corporate personal property replacement tax revenue. And so just to give you a little history on that, originally we were being told to budget about 10% less than what we had last year. In the actual tentative budget, I was about 18% because I really wasn't confident of that 10% number. And I thought 18 was a good conservative number, that we'd be in good shape with that. Well, I was obviously very wrong. The final reduction is about 33% from the prior year. And so last year we took in $7.3 million, and this year we're now anticipating $5 million. So it's a $2.3 million decrease, $2.4 million decrease. So what essentially does that do to our budget? Well, if you look on page 58, you may recall that initially we had about a $1.6 million surplus in that budget. So about $1 million drops off of that $1.6 million surplus, and we're now about a $600,000 surplus estimated for FY '25. And so, again, you'll see that that's reflected on page 58, which is that summary document there that I have that you can kind of take a look at what all those numbers look like combined. So that is the one major change that we've had since, and again, not a great change, but something obviously we have to look at. We were waiting for, and when we originally talked about this tentative budget, we were still waiting on that number. That number came out about a week and a half ago, and so that's why I've made that change. The only other thing that we're looking at right now is we had initially talked about transfers, two transfers of about $5 million, one from the education fund of $3 million, another one from the O&M fund of about $2 million for our capital projects that are going on this summer. I think what we're going to do is we're going to make a little change to that, and we're going to just simply take money. We would pass a second resolution at that meeting in September that would allow us to take up to $5 million out of the O&M fund as needed. So if we don't need to transfer it this year, then we wouldn't transfer it. We probably will in a future year, but it kind of makes sense to just kind of leave that money in there until we need it and go forward with that. We would probably take another resolution again next year, same sort of thing, to continue paying these projects off, because right now, as we know, these projects are scheduled for completion in August of 2025, but that's already into the next fiscal year. That's into FY '26. So we're still going to be paying these projects off into that year as well. And so it'll be better if we, you just kind of move the money in and need it, or as needed, and then spend it down as we go. And so and then we'll true that up next year, because this year is really, we have a large number budgeted in there. I don't know that we're going to need all of that money this year, but eventually we are going to need all of that, whether it's this fiscal year or next fiscal year as we move through the project. So really, at this particular point, the process is such that we would have a hearing, formal hearing on the budget at the regular meeting coming up here in September. The Board of Education would then consider adoption of the FY '25 budget as presented. And then we would have an additional resolution that would allow that transfer of up to $5 million out of the O&M fund as needed. And so that's where we stand right now. I don't see any other major changes coming for the September regular meeting. Of course, if there were anything to happen between now and then, we would let you know and then make those changes as well. Other than that, I don't have any other update information. I wish I had better update information for the board, but that's what we have right now. Happy to answer any questions.
Brian, can you just clarify, so originally it was going to be a total, previously, total of $7 million that was going into, to fund the current projects from the education and I forgot what other fund.
It was a total of $5 million.
Oh, it was never 7.
It was never
5.
7, it
Okay,
was only
okay.
5, yeah. There was $3 million from the ed fund,
Thank
and
you.
$2
No, you
million.
just clarified that.
Yeah, and $2 million from the O&M fund.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. 'Cause
Yeah.
that was my question. I'm like, no, you said up to 5, so I just.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome.
I don't know how else to put it, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's
We-
a shortfall of $1 million there.
Look,
so.
we knew that number has been artificially high
Right,
over the last few
right,
years.
that's right.
And I never expected it to be at the $10 and $11 million that we were taking in and stay there. We always figured it would come back down, and well, here we are now.
realistic,
Well,
yeah.
I don't know where it's going to level off. Again, historically, the number's about $3.5 million for, annually for the district. I don't know if it's ever going to level back off at that number. We might be closer to this $5 million number going forward. But again, I don't know that for sure yet. We have to kind of wait and see.
Okay. Yep, adjustments.
you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for that.
Can we dial Tim?
Hi, Tim.
Oh, all right. Hi, how are you?
Just acknowledge, just acknowledge it. He's-
Yeah, hi, Tim. I'm so sorry that you're not feeling well. All right, well, Brian just wrapped up, so we're gonna move on to continue the conversation regarding future funding of future facilities projects. So Tim, Brian, James, and I met with the Village of Willow Springs on Friday, August 23rd, for an information gathering session. It was a successful meeting in that regard. We walked away with not only a hard copy of the zoning, which you all have, but also a better understanding of their vision, what collaboration could look like, and special considerations. So I'm going to summarize a few key points here, and then, but then ask the others that were in the meeting here to chime in, and then we can have discussion. So from a vision perspective, the village didn't want to speculate on what their community would want to see, but are comfortable with any development permitted within the zoning classification. The question they said they always consider is if a development is conducive to or harmful to the existing environment. So they acknowledge that proposals are not always a perfect fit with zoning, so they would anticipate a public hearing. Community feedback during that hearing would provide direction on how they evaluate any proposal. To that end, they noted that it can be a faster and easier approval path when the seller works closely with the village from the very beginning, but it can certainly be successful when entities follow a more distinct linear process where, you know, we would do our part with terms and conditions and bids, and then they would evaluate it from there. But in either scenario, it seems that the most important aspect to a smooth process is consistent communication with each other. And then lastly, if we want to continue information gathering on this topic, it will definitely be important to talk to the Pleasantdale School District next, which I think we expected. The village also encouraged meetings with the Park District and Emergency Services. Obviously, if a development is more residential, it heavily impacts the schools. If it's senior living focused, it's going to impact emergency services. So in this part of the discussion, it was also shared that impact fees are required. So that's the top line. It was a fairly quick, but like I said, productive meeting, and I'm sure we have some clarifying questions. I want to just also thank James for being here tonight as our counsel and subject matter expert on this. So then I don't know if Brian, Tim, or James, like if you wanted to weigh in on anything else, but then we can open it up for a conversation.
That accurately captures.
Yeah,
That, you did a great
I
job.
would say that accurately captures the summary of the meeting.
Tim, do you have anything you want to add, or you're
No,
good?
I think you got it all spot on. I think the one thing that I heard that resonated with me was that a project of this magnitude will never fit the zoning regulations, and that there would more than likely be a need for some kind of hearing. So that was, I don't know if refreshing is the right word, but it was helpful for us to get that information.
Yeah, that it would be expected, sure.
Yeah.
So that's what we know.
Thanks.
So for the discussion,
Yeah.
okay, are you looking at like, do we want to do future funding? Like, what is that?
Well, so yeah, what I'm curious about is, do we have enough information, enough interest around the table to then have similar conversations or information gathering sessions with a couple of the other entities that are directly impacted there, so that we might consider the terms and conditions conversation or something like that? Like, where do we want to take this, right? What else do we want to know? And that's kind of what I'm just hoping to get a feel from everybody on.
Well, I mean, I think like the first question we need to ask is, do we even want to move forward, which I don't know, with selling the property, with doing a referendum, whatever we might want to do for more funding sources? Or are we okay with the funding sources are we okay with where we are, and do we not even want to pursue, something big?
okay.
And I think that, I would like to, so I think from what we are, I am all for doing the best that we can for LT and bringing as much funding that we can so that we can utilize it. We can achieve the plan that we've kind of laid out there, but I don't know that we as a board have had that full discussion to say, do we as a board want to go there? We have the discussion of, I've brought it up several times, selling the property as well as a referendum.
Oh, sure.
And looking at that. But I think the first question is, do we have a consensus amongst the board that this is something we want to move forward with for more funding sources? And then I think that's the first question. And then the second question would be, what would those funding sources look like? Would that be the property? Would that be a referendum? Or would that be a combination of both? And then the third would be, how do we go about doing that? Is kind of what my thought is.
No, that's very clear. I'm glad that you stepped it out like that, because when we first brought this up, a couple months ago, exploring future funding, maybe we didn't say out loud. I felt like we had a conversation like, okay, we know we can't do everything with what we have, so, but let's talk about that.
Right.
I think the question is, do we even want to look at future funding?
Right. That's a really good point. It's a question we haven't had any discussion
I think there's been
around.
assumptions on it.
Sure. Well, because, we talked about what that community input was that we received, 3 years ago, and what that looked like. And it did encompass us doing a lot of necessary improvements, upgrades, and, but we have done a lot and accomplished a lot in a fairly short period of time. We're getting a lot done. So I guess the question is too, does, would the board be interested in continuing to do what we need to do, which would be then finding alternative funding sources, because we've exhausted what we have at this point.
Is it worth it? This is, just thinking completely out loud here. So, to go back to the LTCAC, you know what I'm saying, to say, do we, maybe that's a question to pose back to the community, to is everybody happy with where we are? Are there still more demands? Because I think we need to hear the community.
Well, that was something that we brought up in that August meeting, was that the data is a few years old. But then we had that conversation, you're going to the community, but we don't know what we have to work with. So does that create a cycle? So we talked about that some, but.
Well, I think, but we haven't gone to the community again, and if we're 3 years out, is that something that we want? Do we want to do multifaceted, those kind of things? Does the board first want to, that would be the question we, I think, need to candidly discuss. Are we just okay with what is there, and then we use our resources that we have every year for what must be done instead of improvements? So I'm for moving forward with full funding, getting as much as we can, so.
Okay.
But I don't know that everyone else has been heard and has said that.
Well, let's everybody weigh in on that. I think that is part of our role, is to see how, how much can we do for the school? We have assets that we can explore, we have community we can go back to and, ask about some direction, and see how that iterates moving forward. So I'm in that camp to keep exploring.
Yeah, and also to the point, if that is the case, and we thought we were gonna take on, whatever, $100 million worth of projects or whatever we wanna do to fulfill, the complete plan, then it's even understanding what does this referendum actually mean to a community. I don't think I even can fully process what those steps look like and what that really, how that really affects and impacts, our community members. Meaning a lot of times people hear referendum and you think maybe that means it's gonna impact your bottom line infinitely, and it's probably a short period of time. I feel like years ago I saw Downers Grove North had when they put together their plan, and they did do a referendum process, with their communities. They were able to break it down by how it would affect and impact each household, and they were able to say for how long it was going to affect them, and I think it was a short period of time, 3 years or something like that.
So I think with that, I mean, kind of like the conversation with the property and gathering information, like I would need a lot more information too about
Right,
all
right,
the things that you're
right.
talking about, and I think our community would also,
Would
right?
want,
And that
sure.
was part of what we touched
Totally.
on in August too, is before we
Right.
go to the community to see what we have to work with too and understand all of those things. But that's part of it. That's
Yeah,
part of
yeah.
The fact gathering,
Yeah.
I would say the referendum fact gathering is no different than like what your meeting was with Willow Springs.
Sure.
It's just, we need to have this information.
Yeah.
But I think, first the question needs to be asked, does everybody feel like we need to have that information? Do we want to move forward?
Well, I'm just gonna go back to the meeting that you had with Willow Springs. You mentioned impact fees. What are those? And when did that come up?
So it came,
And-
oh, sorry, go ahead.
And how long has it been in their ordinance? Has it always been?
I'm gonna
I don't know
punt
when
to
they
James.
passed the ordinance granting them, but impact fees are a way to accommodate municipalities, governmental bodies that are directly affected by developments. It's a way specifically to help, in our situation, schools, when you have a development come into place, kids are generally, right, generated depending on what type of development it is. And that has an impact on capacity as well as other things. And so the thought process is, it's a mechanism to help provide land and/or cash to those schools that are directly impacted by those developments, so that then they can, if they need to build an additional brand-new school or additional wing, or, again, it's very specific, depends on what's happening, but, or do they get cash in lieu of that land so they can do other things, put a addition onto a building. So the intent is to assist those governmental bodies that are directly impacted from the development in a manner in which can help offset those costs that arise from the development.
And so who pays that? The buyer or the seller?
Well, it's, the developer pays them. So if, like, for example, if Newman Homes is doing a development, Newman Homes generally is part of the development, and it depends on how, when the process goes through and it's platted and how many homes there are, it's the developer that will pay the impact fees. You don't have, also, this is something that's been passed for your benefit. If you didn't want them, for example, you can always say no, too.
I mean, I'm just asking about them because it was brought up in your meeting.
No, I'm just
So
saying this
it's
is-
something
it's-
that
it's-
nobody has been aware of in the public.
Wait, so we would have to include that in terms and conditions, that there would be impact fees?
No.
Or is
you
that something
don't.
that's worked out through the village, through their process?
So almost every developer is aware of impact fees. Usually one of the things when they start looking at a development is they'll check to see if they have to pay impact fees and see what those costs are and how they work. I've never in my career put into a terms and conditions anything about impact fees. That's
Okay.
something the developer considers when he's, or her, buying the property, marketing the property, developing it, and doing their cost analysis.
So, and it came up when we were talking about, the other entities that would be important to have a similar, meeting with, because again, depending on what would go there, how would they be impacted, and so James specifically
Right,
asked
this is not just-
the question. Yeah,
LT, the Pleasantdale would also, get these as well. There's different calculations based on the school, the type of school, not you or them. So, again, the intent is to try and help those folks because, if you have a 400, 500, that's not what you'll have, but, if you have these big developments come into place, the school gets all of a sudden an enormous situation here, right? And then you can have the developer in a large plot of land might donate whatever the calculations are under the ordinance, 50 acres, whatever it may be. The school gets the 50 acres free, and then they have to use that 50 acres to offset the impact of that development. You can't put like a recreational facility there, athletics facility. It's the intent is to offset the impact of the development. So that's how that would come into play. The impact fees too are one-time payments. Correct. They're paid one time and then they're done. The long-term would be any of the property tax revenue that would come from those communities, or community, after those development was, as homes were rolling onto the property tax rolls, they'd roll on as new property, and so that's where the longer-term dollar amount comes into play. But the impact fees are just one time.
Yeah, and the property taxes obviously are in arrears, so the development will be put into place. The impact is felt before the tax revenue starts to come in.
Right.
To quote-unquote offset
Yeah.
those costs.
So are those impact fees, how do these compare to other traditional impact fees that you have seen? Are they pretty standard? Yeah?
Yeah.
And it makes sense to me from like the school and the residential standpoint from like a youth, but we talked a little bit about like if it was a senior residential, so like.
Correct.
Talk
So-
to me like about how that would.
Right, so if
what
it's a
impact
senior,
fees-
so it's based on, there's a formula that they try to anticipate how many students are generated from a type of home. So if it's senior housing, then depending on what it is, you would anticipate, again, it's also by bedrooms. You know, if you have a one-bedroom or a two-bedroom, generally people aren't having, you're not anticipating new families coming in with that small of a type. So with senior housing, generally, you don't see those impact fees because it's not creating the problem that you need to address.
Age restricted generally too.
Right.
Right.
Right, so I would imagine in that type of scenario, again, depending on how it's done, but, that's why you see like in a Dell Web development or something, you have a lot of folks come in, but there's not a lot of impact fees because there's not a lot of kids.
Okay, so the impact fee sounds like it's a lot more skewed towards, for like younger, or families that would be.
That's the
adding
intent, right.
Students to the population. Okay.
Correct. And again, there are municipalities that do not pass these ordinances. If you don't have this ordinance isn't in place, you're not entitled to get them. So depending, we have clients that are in municipalities that don't have impact fee ordinances, so when the development goes in, there aren't any.
I was just gonna point out that when you look at the ordinance, it was passed in 2007,
There you go.
so it wasn't something new.
And then that was reaffirmed last November.
Right.
That was 2006. Was it 2007?
I don't know, you're making, no, 2007.
Approximately 2007.
June 7th.
July 12th,
2006.
my
Oh.
birthday in 2007.
Oh, they made the fine, yeah.
I haven't seen
They
it.
made the,
Well, it was new to the board.
Correct, but it wasn't something that was just passed last
Okay.
week for this.
Right.
This has been standing for this. But correct, this is the first we have that
Yeah,
printed.
it was good to have that
well, you
reiteration.
guys got this last November. So when they reaffirmed this last November, you guys had this.
The ordinance?
Everything.
The ordinance that you have on your desk is not the
packet
impact
and
fee.
We didn't have the explanation though of the impact fees.
Yeah, you
It
guys,
was in here,
both
but-
of these, which we got at the meeting last week, this was given to you guys last December after they reaffirmed in November.
This is this one is the zoning.
Right.
That's not the
So
impact fee. which
this
is
stuff
separate.
here isn't new to last week. They just
It's the
provided
impact.
copies
Got
of
it.
this,
Okay.
which was the same information that the village gave us last year.
Okay, so, okay, I've not read this through recently, but is the impact fees part of this, or is this just the ordinance about what can go in there? That's
James,
where
can you
this-
talk about that?
Yes, the former, not the latter. It deals with the zoning and what can
Got it,
go
so
there.
the impact
Yeah.
fee, so then.
It's not in
It's
here.
not spelled
That was
out
not,
there.
so the question then is, the ordinance was 2007, but the impact fees, when was that on the books?
See if it's in here. Yeah, I don't. Here we go. 1998, June 25th, 1998.
Okay, so it's not something new that's just been passed in the last year. Okay. And where was that? Were you? in the-
Well, I printed up the ordinance for me to have here. I'm welcome. Yeah, I'm happy to leave it behind and you guys can have a copy too.
Okay, got it. Okay, I just tried to,
Yep, no
Got it.
worries.
but I don't think we had counsel before that guided us on the impact fees as a board for consideration. But I would say that was built into, what had been proposed earlier. Like some of what was gonna happen.
On the previous sale?
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, the impact fees would have been applicable at that time, depending on whatever development would have gone into play at that time. Again, it would just depend on, well, at that time, presuming what was proposed to be built, you probably would not have gotten any, right?
But there was a buffer in there and those kind of things, like they did different things like that, like donation of land and things like that.
Yeah, but it's usually, The impact fees deal with residential developments. So again, I don't remember, I don't know the whole entire previous development offer, but it was mostly commercial/industrial, if I remember.
But they still put like things in that would have.
Oh, yes.
With the barrier, like when you look at the trees and things like
Correct.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't want to talk about that because the people don't like it. But yes, in addition to impact, in addition to the money and land in here, right, there's other things that can be considered to help offset some of the impact, right? Berms, trees, all of those things. That's
A fee versus the impact of it.
right. But that's more nuanced as opposed to, the ordinance and what the school districts are entitled to per ordinance.
And to your point, that's not something that you've ever written up in terms and conditions. It's a.
No, because,
It's just.
It's, the
part
ordinance
of
dictates what it
doing
is.
business.
Right.
Right.
The ordinance dictates it. The municipalities are very familiar with dealing with the developers. Developers are very familiar with that. I think, I don't do that, but I'm sure that's one of the first things they look up is see how, in addition to my cost to acquire, build, construct, what public improvements do I need to do, as well as impact fees. So, right, that's something the developer are doing, and then they usually, work with the village.
Yeah.
I think the other interesting thing that they shared was these impact fees will help the community, but in all honesty, it's not like if we were to sell this property, that all of a sudden houses would start going up. It's going to take minimally 5 years for anything to kind of even break ground, to give the community some time to plan for and figure out what they're going to do to support their community with the growth that would be coming, which I thought was helpful to know.
Really?
Does anybody-
5 to 6 years, huh? That
Well,
seems
just
normal, I
thinking
guess.
like-
Just, like, biggest scenario, like, okay,
Right.
like, from a time standpoint, okay.
Are there any other, are any other questions about meeting, or do we go back to how far, what's the appetite to continue down this path?
So I don't have an appetite for any kind of referendum. And if we are looking for additional funds, the first thing that needs to be looked at is the property before going to the public for any kind of referendum.
Yeah, I agree with Michael on that one. I think we have to exhaust all options that we have internally first, and at that point, we can reevaluate what we need to still get done and how much it's going to cost, because I think there's still some questions out there, because our bids are so old, to be able to figure out what are our priorities. But I do have an appetite for seeing, if nothing else, what that property will give us in terms of funds. And it's not to say, I imagine, and James, you can help us here, that we could build in the terms and conditions in such a way that if we don't like the number that we're giving, that we can walk back away from this. And it won't cost us anything to do so. Is that fair to say?
Well, you can always reject, right, you can always, you're not, once you decide you're willing to sell it, and we go out and do that, and you get bids back, you don't have to accept any of them if you don't like any of them, even if they meet your price, whatever that price is. If you decide, you know what, we've decided this is not, we're going to keep it because we want to do X, that's fine. So you can always decide to reject all of the bids. You're not compelled to ever accept them by going out. So you do have that flexibility to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, the cost would be just going through and drafting it and putting it out there and whatnot. So it's not an enormous cost to do it.
And I think that's where we came to in August too, because we first brought this back up, was exploring what we have at our disposal right now before we go down the path of anything else, and before we go back to the community also. I don't know.
But if we're at over $100 million, okay, like if that's the plan, I don't even remember the last number, I just know it's a lot, and it keeps growing. I'm sure if we went back again, it would be much more. I don't think it's even realistic to think that we would even ever get that for the property, so.
Oh, no.
So by just exploring the land sale, then that dream list has to be reduced, so that
Right.
is.
Right.
And that's why I say, I think both are very feasible. I don't think you can go to referendum without the sale, and we could just do the sale and not discuss the referendum, but in just doing the sale, we won't even be able to, you know, achieve much of what's on that list.
That's how I feel too. I would agree with that. I guess, and I would also say that, right, there are two feasible options. So I don't think I would rule either out exclusively. I would probably want to look at reevaluating, you know, what, you know, if we are gonna go down that path of looking at what, you know, what we could yield for, you know, for the district with the property, and then what that leaves us with on the table, and what really we could realistically accomplish. I mean, I don't know, I've heard from a lot of other community members that, you know, I mean, where there's a lot of areas we didn't even begin to touch on, I mean, because we just didn't have the funding for it. We haven't touched any of our athletics, we've not probably fully realized the potential of what we could do for our accessibility needs. I know we're doing that, we'll continue to do that, but, you know, there are still a lot of areas that we haven't been able to really skim the surface too much with. So I can't rule out that there wouldn't be other ways to fund those needs if the desire is there from the community. And I have heard a lot of people say they'd like to see more done.
Elvia, do you have anything you want to add? I want to make sure everybody has a chance to weigh in.
So, what exactly are you seeking? What is the decision point that you're seeking? You want to
So
know?
the question that Jill posed that is being discussed is, what's the appetite to consider future funding for the needs of the school, and what direction do we want to take it? So when we talked in August, we said there's a lot to do. Let's start with the asset that we have, the property, and get some more information about how that would even work. And so that's kind of what we've done over the past month. So what I'm hearing from Michael is, you know, to kind of go ahead and continue, and from Tim to continue down the path of seeing what the property could mean financially for the district. No appetite for a referendum, but definitely not going back to the community from Tim until we do that. But I'm hearing from Jill and Carrie that maybe we do that all at the same time, like pursue the property, but also understand what referendum means, maybe re-engage the community, like more holistic at once instead of like a linear stepped approach. That's how I'm hearing the voices at the table. So
That's a great summary from
I
that
wanted
point.
to see where you were in that too.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't want to speak for Elvia. Please, Elvia, have an opportunity to.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was, you summarized it really well, but I wanted Elvia to.
I guess I'm hearing different things, and I'm just like soaking it all in, and I've heard different opinions from the same people, you know, through the different meetings. So I'm trying to just, you know, come to terms with it all. I thought originally phase 2 was more of not essential, but then I hear it is essential. How do we consider phase 2? I guess that's where I would start. How is phase 2 considered? Is it a must? Is there a timing for it? Do we need to, you know, is there a time-sensitive stamp on getting that work done? And, yeah, so I guess that's my first question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there are different opinions, but I don't think it's a must.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'll weigh in here. I think it depends on how you define must, right? And how you define wants and needs is, that's a critical part of that question. I think the more important part of that is phase 2 is very vague right now. Because 2 years ago when it was outlined, it was done with no specificity. So it's just a lot of broad topics. But it's also, the other really important thing to note is it's a continuation of a lot of phase 1 work. So, in other words, we've outlined, we know very tangibly we've done a ton of restroom work this summer. In order to complete the restrooms in this district, the other part of that is in phase 2. We outlined some classroom modernization projects in phase 1 that we're not going to get to, but it was only about 20% of all the classrooms in our district. So the other 80% were outlined in phase 2. HVAC, AC, mechanical work. There's a lot, the whole Vaughn building is not air conditioned, that's all included in phase two. Whereas phase one is more of the main campus.
I guess,
So I guess
yeah.
it depends on how, if you identify restrooms and HVAC work as musts,
right,
then it's a must. If you identify it as a want, then it's a want.
right.
So it really depends on how you define those terms.
Well, you brought up a key point, though. You said that that plan was developed 2 years old, and things have changed since. I guess I'm still of the opinion that that's a wide range, 85 to 100 million, and we know darn well we don't have that money. It would be nice to see what we really are trying to focus on and prioritize, especially those phase two that have spilled over from phase one. And I'd like to put a dollar figure on that, like have those kind of estimates. That would give me a greater sense of what I consider personally essential. In my opinion, like, everybody's got a different opinion, but HVAC infrastructure, for example, is a dire need for me. That's just, an opinion, but everybody could feel different ways. So I think it will be helpful, because just to go off of a random, not random, but it was a list that was developed 2 years ago, and a lot has happened these 2 years. That would be helpful. As far as going to see what's out there, that could be okay, just, it seems like it's quite a path to get there, though, because exploring the property would mean, I guess, we're putting it on the market and getting bids back. And from what was described, it's a very collaborative process where, and maybe you can clarify, Jill, putting it on the market and getting bids back, is that at what point does the collaboration take place? Is that if we were to go with an award a bidder, is that when the collaboration takes place, or with the public hearings and what they plan on doing with the land, is that when it takes place? Or because I obviously, once we sell it, I feel like then it's in the seller's hand, and then they would work with the village on what their plans are. But I guess for the village to accept it, they would need to know what those plans are. So how does that collaborative effort look throughout this process of, possibly awarding?
So what we talked about in that meeting on Friday was it can be what you described first, which is we do our part and then we hand it off, or we can be part of it. So the village mentioned, they would fully expect a community hearing, right? Because, whatever development might come back, we can be part of that. We can be part of the panel. We can be part of that conversation. We can do a town hall with them before we would even draft terms and conditions. They were very open to that. The key takeaway was, within the zoning classification, and then, they're going to evaluate it based on that community feedback and all the other considerations that they have. Is it conducive to or harmful to? And, for us though, but to your point, we're the seller, so we're not as deeply involved in that, but we certainly care about all of that, like how that comes together.
No, right. I'm just asking because, it's kind of like everything starts always with an idea, and then you can go down the rabbit hole, and then there's like, oh, wow, we didn't expect all of this. So we gotta, we also have to think of everything long-term, all the way through with the whole process. So I guess those were questions I would want to know how that would look, because that sounds a lot more effort than just a simple, we'll put some terms and conditions and put it out for bid, see what we get. It doesn't
Right.
sound that simple. So if it's not going to be that simple, then I would want to know a little bit more of what that phase two, what are we considering that we really want to do, and put a dollar figure on what kind of funding we're even seeking or evaluating, because we don't have the 85 to 100 million that it's currently estimated that was 2 years ago. So it does sound like there's more efforts going into this to find out what we have. So my opinion would be if we were to go down that road, I would like to know a little bit more about what that phase 2 entails. And I think, Brian, you had mentioned at the August 19th meeting about, I can't remember if it was August 19th, but August 5th it could have been, that you thought one option could have been going out to the community. And I know this is kind of like going back to circles, and I think others have felt like that's counterproductive. I'm thinking, based on, you know, the information gathered at the meeting and all the efforts that it could conceivably take to put this out, you know, just to see what we would get in a bid, that it might make some sense to have, it may not be as much of an effort to do some surveys out with the community as you had proposed, just to see what that's looking like and feel the climate. Just a thought. Those are my thoughts.
Can you share a little bit, kind of go,
Yeah,
you did
yeah,
at
I mean,
August
let me-
5th, you talked a little bit about that, what that would look like, because it sounds like, you know, I'm hearing, you know, revisit that, some community engagement. I'm feeling like Jill and Carrie, like that's part of, you know, one piece that you would like to explore also. Not that others, not that we, Tim or Michael or myself wouldn't, it's just like in what order and how does this all
Well, and I think like going,
move
like
the needle?
exploring the sale is not putting it out to bid, is what I'm hearing. Like, it's more of meeting with different community members, hearing that while we go down that path, not saying, you know what, we're gonna put it right out to bid. I feel there's a lot
Right.
of conversation that needs to happen before that would happen.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna, and I would say I'm not supportive of going back and paying the architects, because it's a significant fee we have to pay them to rebid everything, you know,
Yeah, so
on
just
that.
let me,
Fully
let me
accurate.
piggyback on what Jill just talked about. So, 2 years ago, when the architects, and honestly, we had all that community input, they'd done mechanical assessments, they took all that input, they put it together in a report that was delivered to the board in January of 2023. Phase 2 included $33 to $38 million worth of classroom modernization that weren't included in Phase 1. So it was a continuation of that work. They also included $22.97 million to $27 million worth of upgrades to physical wellness and athletic facilities. 18 to 21 million would have been upgrades to remaining AC, mechanical, and temperature control that is not currently included in Phase 1. And then there was about 8 to 9 million of miscellaneous items, roofs, parking lots, mechanical equipment, and then there was 1.5 to 2.5 million in accessibility projects. So that was what they identified as Phase 2. So if the board right now is interested in us going back and drilling down into Phase 2 and doing a lot more work on that, then that would, I'm just throwing out a time frame. That would be a project that we would probably focus on over the next 4 to 6 months in terms of doing focus groups, doing surveys. To Jill's point, asking the architects to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, we need a lot more specificity now in Phase 2. So that would be work that we would work on this fall.
I didn't think it was that much. That's not the way I had, I didn't get that impression when you first brought it up. That sounds like a lot more effort than what I thought you had laid out at that August meeting. So that's a lot more.
I mean, I guess we could do it as quickly, we could do it as thorough or not thorough as the board wants to, right? I mean, if it's a matter of asking our architects, hey, can you look at this in a week, then we're not going to get much new information back. My personal opinion is if we want to do this the right way, then we need to do exactly what, or maybe even more than what we did 2 years ago, which included surveys and focus groups. And that was about a 4-month process.
But I thought that, like, in the original Phase 1,
Mm-hmm.
like, for what we're doing now in Phase 1, we don't have enough money to do in the original Phase 1.
Yeah, so there's going to be some projects that were originally included in Phase 1 that would have to be added to that list.
Which is separate
Right,
from,
which
like,
is even
Phase
more
2.
than Phase
Right, so
right,
it's like.
right. Yep.
So I think,
So that's right.
first
yeah,
you
over
should,
$100
like, talk
million.
about, like, the rest of Phase 1 of, if that was still a priority,
Yeah.
to finish that up, then look at phase
Yeah,
two.
there are 3 items that were like 2 years ago that were identified in phase 1 that at least today, we can't commit to doing. Now, that doesn't mean that through the budgeting process over the next year, 2, 3 years, maybe we can fund these projects, but right now, we can't commit. That's the North Campus Classroom Modernization Project, which is about 60 classrooms, the Westfield Athletic Turf Field Project, and then a South Campus Athletic Turf Field Project as well. So those 3 projects, again, identified 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, would need to be added to that list.
And don't forget too, the pricing that we have
It's 2 years old.
is 2 years old as well. And so that becomes a factor even going forward, because you have to, account for inflation, because all of these projects, if the board says, hey, we're gonna move forward with these projects, they're not all gonna happen in 1 year. It's gonna be over multiple years, and so you have to account for inflation going forward as well. So just a note on that.
And I think that's where the circular conversation comes in, and this is what the board has been wrestling with since early August, is do we do all this planning before we know what funding is available? Or do you identify what funding is available and then do the planning to see what we can actually fund? That's, to me, that's the question that the board ultimately has to decide upon.
Well, in August, that's how we ended up having.
Exploring the
just-
property.
Yeah,
Yep.
exploring the property, was deciding we at least wanted to determine the funding that we have, that we already have
Okay.
accounted for
Right. 'Cause
versus.
the property's the known.
That's the.
As an
right,
asset.
Right, but fully knowing that it's not going to get us,
Not anywhere close.
no, but then, but
Right.
it's another
Part of the.
piece of information that we
Right.
could learn
Sure.
more about.
Sure.
Okay, so you meant the items that spilled over from phase 1 to phase 2. It's safe to say that that's a no-brainer.
They're not
that-
even in phase 2 right now.
They're not even in phase 2 right now. So is that the 5 million you're talking about that we're short on?
No.
No.
It's more
Okay,
than that.
so what, if, what was the estimate for the spillover? How much money is that?
I would have to give, I
mean, no.
don't want to quote numbers, I would have to give the exact
Okay.
numbers. I know from just memorization
Yeah.
of the big report that was given 2 years ago,
Gotcha.
that Westfield project was about 3.5 million. I know that number, I can't remember the number for the classroom modernization and the South Campus turf field project.
It was around 15 million.
Yeah.
About
For those,
15
for those 3
15
for all of
items,
that,
Michael?
yeah.
Yes.
million? Okay, well, that's
For
very
the rest
helpful.
of phase 1.
Mhm.
Plus that you have the phase 2.
Right.
So the
So you're talking
phase
a
1
significant
shortfall is
amount
about
of money.
15
Right.
million.
Right.
Okay, so if we're talking rough, okay, so that's roughly about, we're not quoting numbers, but roughly about 15 million neighborhood that were already identified from phase 1 that we can't do.
Right.
Well, remember, some of that is going out to bid. The architects are looking at part of the modernization of the classrooms here for next year, which is the HVAC projects. We're also looking at the renovation of the elevator here as well, and then at least 2 of the washroom stacks here also. That's what we currently have. The architects are working on, the board gave them permission to do that, and those would be projects that would start in the summer of 2025. And so those were some of the projects that would have been all part of that original phase 1. And then we had that funding discussion, as you recall, about utilizing some of the district fund balance for completion of those projects starting in the summer of 2025. So some of that, matter of fact, all of that was part of the phase 1. But it isn't going to get us to the completion of phase 1. So,
So are you saying that's not really 15 million then, because we do have money for that other stuff?
well, the cost is going to be the cost. We have not made a determination yet of how much, once we receive those bids back, the bids back for those projects, we'll take a look at those and then determine where the district is financially at that time to say, how much of our fund balance do we want to use to finish, to complete those projects that we have now out to bid. And again, that was our conversation from before, and I also made note too that we would have, some potential additional surplus from the FY24 operating year that we could utilize for those projects as well. Won't have that number till probably November, but we'll have that information, and it'll probably coincide with the timing of the bids for the receiving of those bids.
Yeah, so those will be two very important variables. Those will be the next two important variables later this fall, November, December, getting bids back and the FY24 audit.
So, are you speculating that we could have enough money from the fund balance and the FY24 operating budget for the HVAC, for what's going out to bid right now?
Yes, we think we're going to have enough money for
Okay.
for those projects.
And if you subtract that from that estimated 15 million of the phase one spillover, what does that turn out to be? More or less?
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at those numbers. I don't want to just throw that one out
Right,
there
right,
yet.
right.
But we'd have to go back and look at what we specifically had in terms of those three projects.
Okay. I would be interested in knowing just at least that. That doesn't take any, those are numbers that are
Just
within the
like
reach.
looking back, you want to know the original numbers from.
Yeah.
okay.
I don't want to
get that.
cause
I can get
or
that.
spend extra money necessarily. I don't want to be quick to doing that, to spending time and resources of, asking architect to do, a brand new estimate or anything like that, or update it. No, I'm not asking for that. I just want to leverage off what we already do have.
I can get that information
Yeah.
for the board.
So that would give me at least an idea of how much are we talking about phase one that is really at least an estimate that we already know for a fact from, it's safe to assume the community, if it was phase one, that means that the community deemed it very important. I don't think the changes in their opinions would have been that drastic then. So it would let me know, at least for me, what are we short on to fulfill what the community has deemed essential from phase one.
The community, while there was feedback,
Yeah.
nobody put an essential, there was feedback from the LTCAC, but this was a board decision,
Okay. You mean
along with
between-
the administration
Okay.
Yeah,
providing a recommendation.
Okay.
The community simply outlined 5 broad objectives that they
Okay.
wanted to see in future facilities improvements.
Okay.
And so those are modernizing our existing classrooms, developing additional collaborative spaces, accessibility upgrades, athletic and wellness facilities, and HVAC control, temperature control.
Okay.
And so as of May, which doesn't include the bids that are coming back here in November, about 50% of the committed funds have been allocated towards collaborative spaces, 25% towards modernizing existing classrooms, 12% towards accessibility, 1% towards community athletic wellness facilities, and then 12% towards HVAC control.
What's the last one, Brian?
12%.
12%
yeah.
for HVAC.
Yeah. And you guys have this as well. This is
Right,
what I
but
sent
that
to you guys.
doesn't
in
We
advance.
talked about this
Yeah.
before.
Right, but that doesn't include all the other money over the last couple of years that went to HVAC.
I think it does.
It,
I think you included that in there, right?
it was only
I-
it did not.
The percentages. But you guys have you guys
Yeah.
have the number of dollars. that-
Right, and
yeah.
it wasn't of all the other years of HVAC work.
Since it started, like,
2019, 2020, that's when we started.
Let me see if I've got that number. That might have been in the May. I know we provided that number in the May, but you're right, it didn't, that's, the numbers I just shared were when the community outlined 5 broad objectives, we've identified how much of, so far in phase 1 has been committed to that, percentage-wise. Just so, and that's just to give you guys a picture of, the community spoke, how are we following along with it? How are we committing to that?
What we put in the May board meeting information was that the recent AC projects and costs, we went back to 2020 and looked at those dollar amounts, and it was $8.2 million. We didn't have a percentage per se of based on all the recent projects, but the total for those recent projects, the AC projects, was $8.2 million. And just to give the board too, again, this is what we talked about in May, The projects that are out there right now, we anticipated the total cost for all of those would be about $12.8 million. That included the cost of renovations, the architect fees, asbestos removal fees, and so that's where we thought we would be, again, in May with these projects. So, but again, we can't simply say, take that from $15 million and this is what's left over. We really need to go back and look at what else is out there and then bring that number back. But just to give you the idea of what we thought the cost would be for, just to refresh everybody's memory, what we thought the cost would be, again, as we talked about in May, for these upcoming bid projects.
Is it 12.8?
It was at 12.8, and that included everything.
Okay.
Renovations, architect fees, asbestos removal fees, and again, estimates on those, but we think we were in pretty good shape with those.
Elvia, the number that you were looking for is 8.5 to 10.5 million total. So on January 9th of 2023, the North Campus Classroom Modernization Project, which is the southwest corner, was projected at 3 to 3.5 million. The Westfield Turf Project was 3 to 3.5 million, and the South Campus Turf Field Project was 2 to 3 million. So the total range there will be 8.5 to 10.5.
Okay.
It does get a little tricky though,
Yeah.
because, for example, the bids that are going to come back in November is HVAC mechanical control work, but it also, by design, we're going to do some ceiling and lighting.
Right.
So that's going to be, it's hard to peg this much is modernization and this much is mechanical, because we're not
They
going to be
go
able to
hand
do
in
all of
hand.
them, but they kind of go hand in hand a
Yeah.
little bit. So we're not able to do all the modernization we want to do with this project, but we're not doing no modernization either. So it's tricky.
Okay.
But that was the number you were looking for, is that 8.5 to 10.5?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you, Michael, for clarifying, I guess, how, how the phases got to be categorized as such. I mean, we have a lot of work cut out for us. I think everybody wants to maximize our funds because there's so much that we do that there has been so many needs that have been identified, so many projects that have been identified. So I guess my only, I wish that we could have this answered. It's not an easy solution because finding out what the bids look like does seem like a very involved process. So I would like to get back to basics and just maybe see if we can get an answer from a realtor about the best time to sell. We've been holding on to this property for a very long time. So I would just, see if there's a way, because how long would you see that we would put this out? If we were to go down that path of how it's been said, well, why don't we put it out, see, write terms and conditions, and see the bids that we would get? What would that effort look like? How long would that be? I guess that's another question that I have. Do you know? I mean, I know
think that's a
that,
great question
James
for
could tell
James.
us,
That's a
yeah.
great
and
question
I
for
know that
James.
3 to 5 years were mentioned, and there is,
Oh, that's,
well, yeah.
well, there's two different, the 3 to 5 years deals with assuming the property is actually sold, bought by someone, and that developer then starts
Okay.
to actually develop it. That's a different
Okay.
thing. So there's 2 components. One is just the legal requirements for you to start selling the process.
Okay.
So that you adopt your resolution, that within 60 days, we're going to open our bids and award the contract. As you know from last time, awarding the contract is not selling the property.
No,
It's
right.
not sold. Okay? You can do one of 2 things generally with the real estate if it needs to be developed. The first thing I'm going to say I've never seen done, but it's technically you can do it. You sell it with no due diligence period. In other words, you sell it, and then whoever was out there, they have to buy it. You're not going to let them go through and do zoning contingencies or anything else. You just sell it to them. The downside, the good side of that is it's sold relatively quickly, and you get it. You don't have to worry about anything. The major downside to that is no reasonable developer is going to give you anything remotely close to what that property's worth if they have to take that, or even probably bid on it. Okay. So then that puts into the second component, which you see all the time, which is you put in due diligence periods. And this is where what I would anticipate in talking, again, working with our partners out there, Due diligence periods can be 90 days, 120 days, 180, they be long. And that's what's necessary for that developer to try and get the approval, if you will, from the municipality as to what they want to develop there. And that process, depending on how we involve people, we can try and make that shorter, but it's a longer process. 90 days is short for a due diligence process. We also have to figure out how long it takes the village to have, to go through it, and if we have something submitted, is there an initial plan review? Do they get back? Is that something that's done? Then there's the plan commission meeting, then there's, assuming there's only one, then it's gotta go to the village board, and how often those are done. So, that period of time, 90 days, as everyone knows, is not a lot of time necessarily. So we would wanna work and see what is a reasonable due diligence period for that zoning to be considered by the village and for them to do it and for us what we think we're willing to work with. So I'm guessing, probably somewhere around at least 120, 180 days for that due diligence period. And what that does, again, is, let's say we sold it to ABC developer. ABC developer, again, depending on how we've done this, but ABC developer at that juncture would then work with the village to say, we want to do this project there. And that commences the process with the village to go through their zoning hearings and whatnot and have that done. And remember, so the plan commission's got to vote on it, and then ultimately their board does too. So we have multiple hearings that we have to do there. Again, I don't know how quickly you can move that, but don't think quickly should be your target here based on the history and whatnot. So, even that 120, 180 may be too short. But, so that's something you think about. So we go out probably 2 months before you award the contract, and then on top of that, let's just pick 180, so you're at 240, right? 240 days before hopefully everything's done. Otherwise, if they're unable to get the zoning they want or relief they want, and it maybe just be reasonable minds can't come, then as you had last time, the deal is generally terminated, and you start from the beginning.
James, just to clarify though, this is different, right, than I'm gonna put my house on the market and I can leave it up there for as long as I want. I can keep taking bids and I can keep doing that. In this particular situation, as you're pointing out, the bid specs will hit the street. We're gonna open those bids on some specified date. Once we see that pricing, that's the end. In that zoning piece and all that, we still aren't receiving additional pricing quotes and that sort of thing.
Correct. So right. So it's significantly different than selling your house, right? It's a much more formalized and less flexible processes, which, to be honest, sometimes the developers don't understand. But yeah, so the price would come in, you set it at a minimum price or no price, however you want to do it. That price is met, you award the contract. $10 million is what it'll be, contingent on the developer getting the zoning for whatever's they want under the B1 or SR or 3, if I'm remembering correctly. That would be the smoothest process. But again, it's a process where this village is going to have to listen to people, see what wants to be built there, and if it's within those parameters and it's reasonable, and so why not? We have no reason to believe it wouldn't go. But if as we saw from the unsolicited Pulte, that you saw a mixed use, which is nice, but it wasn't within the recommended parameters. The lots are a lot smaller, than what was recommended. So it's going to be a time-consuming process, I'm assuming, and we can try to work collaborative ways, like, do we want to suggest submit with your bids, proposed schematic of how many, what your layout is, what you're proposing exactly, what you're there, so then we could work with interested parties and they can take a look at it and say, this, they're not going to stamp it and say this is good, this is not, but this may be more reasonable, but again, subject to public input, than opposed to this other one. But unfortunately, there are a lot of moving parts when you have raw land, and that you need to have settled before they're willing to, at the end of the day, commit to acquiring the property and giving you that big check.
Thank you. No, that's helpful. I mean, it definitely is not a simplified process. I guess I just go back to timing, at the end of the day, is there a way that, we've held on to the land. LT has held on to the land for a very long time, and it is our due diligence to keep exploring the way we have been, the way that the board has. I'm just curious about the best time to sell, if it's a good time. And I guess better yet, by the time that those bid openings, because that's really when the market hit, when it's in the market, right? I mean, and I'm not saying good or bad, but I'd be interested, in knowing. And Brian, last time I know you said, I had kind of asked about the market. I know you said that's not your cup of tea as a lawyer.
Yeah.
But something to that effect, I guess. That would be my only question.
Yeah, I don't want to lose that question, so that's for the whole board. So is there interest, I think what your point is should the board hire a consultant that can give them
Well-
feedback on like market conditions and
No,
things like
no,
that? or-
no. I mean, is that, so no one has that answer, I guess? I mean,
I don't have that answer.
okay.
Maybe, I would
Okay.
Yeah.
not trust myself to give you that answer. I would
no.
want someone that has more of
Okay.
that expertise.
so, in your capacity as a lawyer, how exactly do you represent us? You only look at, so you don't branch it all into market conditions at all, then?
No, I just help
Okay.
you sell your property in the proper legal
Gotcha.
methodology. The boards decide when they want to do it under what terms.
Or provide any guide, okay. No, I wanted to know if we had something in-house already, from a legal perspective. I thought, because I've been asking about this, and I thought at some point we had that in-house. So the question, I guess, can't really be answered unless there was a vote that everybody would want that, and I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know that it would need
I
a
don't know that
vote.
anyone else is interested in that, but it was a question that I had that I thought could have been more easily answered. I don't care. I guess at this point, if the board doesn't care to entertain it, I'm okay moving without it.
Yeah, and just to clarify, it wouldn't require a vote. It's just, if the board majority wants me to explore that, then I can
Right.
bring information back, but.
Right. I don't know that it's been in the past, so I'm good either way. Just, those are just thoughts that I'm expressing, that's all.
I mean, I think it's subjective. I mean, it's like, I wouldn't want to spend any money bringing
Yeah.
somebody to tell us about market conditions. I think, we put it out there. If we're deciding to sell it, we put it out there. We set terms and conditions, we set a price. James, there was one thing you said that I thought was interesting. I wanted to circle back to. You said, set the minimum price or no price. What did you mean by that? I don't understand.
Yeah,
Can you
so
explain?
you technically, when selling the property, you don't have to set a price if you don't want to. And there is a benefit, if you will, to doing that. It's not a great benefit, but there is one. So there's nothing that requires you to set a minimum price, okay? Some people will sell it, this is usually done when you have property that's not very desirable and they're trying to unload it.
Understand.
And so you put it like $1 and you see what people are willing to pay.
Kind of like a bid, like a little silent auction almost?
Well, that's what yours is going to be. Yours is going to be, it has to be sold either by silent auction or open outcry.
Okay.
Okay, I've only, again, my experience, we had one client ever choose open outcry. No one showed up to buy the property, so we didn't get that done. Otherwise, it's always been by sealed bid. Yeah, so it's an auction process, exactly. And then by setting a price, and if you don't get that price met or nobody submits a bid that meets your conditions, you're then allowed to utilize a broker to sell it. But the problem then becomes you have to sell it for the same price that you set that presumably either nobody submitted a bid for or didn't submit conforming bid. So it's a benefit, in my opinion, that's not very great. But yeah, you don't have to do it if you do not want to.
I appreciate that clarification, because I wouldn't have thought that that's what anybody would do, but I wanted to.
Yeah, you do see it, and I have seen it with, properties that are, all properties valuable, but more valuable properties. But usually you see it when you're just like, I've got to get rid of this. It's a burden on the district.
Oh, wait, just so that I understand clearly. So you're saying this would be through closed bids, but we can set a maximum price that we would take, so. A
Minimum,
a
right,
minimum,
so-
Right, and is that the course you're recommending for what the feedback you're hearing?
in your, I mean, people are gonna submit a bid, like you've gotten an unsolicited bid for prices, so, it depends what you want to do. You have a set amount of, well, I shouldn't say set, you have a project that needs to be completed, and you have to get funds for that. What you can do based on your history and say, we think this property is worth this, or we're just not willing to sell it for less than $10 million. It doesn't matter if someone wants to buy it for 9, we don't want to sell it, we'll hold it. It sounds like you're in that ballpark, and that's what you would want to do, so you would set that price that you're comfortable with. Now, again, if nobody submits a price at, let's again say it's $10 million, then you have no conforming bids, and we start afresh, which is fine. But I just want to be clear, whether we sell it by sealed bid or open outcry, it's always got to be to the general public by some type of one of those two bid processes.
So if we don't set a minimum price, we have to take whatever,
No, you
That's-
never have to take a price at all.
like, yeah, we could just,
Yep, you can go out, you can set the price at $1, you can set the price at $10 million, and someone can come in and offer you $100 million. You may not be reelected if you say no to something like that, if it's viable, but no, you're not obligated to ever sell the property. So if someone submits the bid and they meet the terms and conditions, we always reserve your right to reject any and all bids. Things can change again. But yeah, so you do not have to accept a bid that's submitted, regardless of how we set it up.
so I guess just, that's something that we would just consider, what those terms and conditions, how are we gonna do, just questions that I'm thinking about. If we were to move forward in writing those terms and conditions, how would we set that minimum price? That's all.
I would just say that I would like to have a similar meeting that we just had with the village, with the other interested parties in, like, with the school district and the park district and, emergency services. Like, I think that would be an important information gathering that would help inform how we would write terms and conditions down the road if we decide to go down that path. I want to make sure that we are meeting with everybody, and having those, fact-finding
Yeah.
sessions.
Understand.
I'm supportive of that.
Yep, I'm on board.
So then beyond that, I think is then the board would have to decide, okay, based on everything that we've learned and all the conversations and the need and what have you, we would have to decide, like, do we want to move forward? That's what James was talking about, set a resolution that we're going to write terms and conditions, and then that starts the process.
And to answer the question, and if you're gonna set a minimum sale price, what you do, you generally, if you need assistance in doing it, if you're able to look at properties close by, you can come up with some price, but if this we don't have, so then you usually will look out to like an appraisal or something to give you an estimate, if that's something you wanted, like a third party to give you, to help you. But again, unlike other areas of law where they're required to get appraisals and they can't sell it, you're technically not required to do that. You're technically allowed to set the price of whatever it is you feel is appropriate, and then, solicit bids based on that. But, there's other ways, like I said, you can get appraisals, all sorts, and see if that, where that comes in and go from there.
So it sounds like next steps could be setting some meetings.
Some additional,
Discussions.
Yeah.
And would you and Tim want to also to carry on that same, I'm asking not just you, I
Yeah.
meant the board.
Yes.
Would we want to do the same process, same players at the table, since there's a consistency there?
I think that's key to have the
Yeah.
consistency. Because there's so much too in a meeting that happens that just is not the summary that you bring back.
Right.
So I think that's great, setting the tone and everything like that.
If you're if you'd be open to that, and if Tim would too, if Tim's still
or
with
Tim.
us. Tim,
Are you there, Tim?
I'm still here, yes, I'd be happy to coordinate that.
sleeping in between.
All right, well, so those are a few good definitive next steps.
So can you summarize
Yeah,
those again?
re-clarify.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so,
Because there was a
One.
lot.
it was a lot.
There's a lot going on.
So we kind of have the three topics that we spent the time on: the property and referendum, so funding sources, but then also the actual projects and community engagement. Those were the things that we talked about. And community engagement around our projects is what what was discussed. So what I heard, and tell me if I'm wrong, some people have more of an appetite to explore more right now. Others stay a little focused, but I don't have consensus on that right now.
Right.
But what I did hear is a green light to set up some meetings with the school district, the park district, and emergency services to have similar conversations, ask the same questions, about vision and collaboration and things like that with those entities in terms of helping us decide, all right, are we ready to go to the next step of terms and conditions or something for the property? The property is the thing that we can kind of have the most, I don't want to say, but it's a known, it's an asset that we have versus going to our entire community and exploring a referendum. And I am very aligned with Tim and Michael in exploring the property first before we, I recognize that there is a need and the need is great financially.
I mean,
So
I
I'm
think the
not
need we
saying-
have is going to exceed the property.
I think,
Yeah.
I think that's really the point of clarification that
Yeah.
I would like to make, is that I think that's a known, that it would be
Right.
beyond that.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to be realistic as
Sure.
far as
Right, I would agree.
why we would even be bringing up other funding
Right.
sources. Is because it's a reality, if we want to see.
It is.
All of those projects
I
come
think
to
the key is
fruition.
if we want to see that. And
Correct.
that circles back to my first
Correct.
question.
Right.
The key is, do we want to see all those projects, or are we,
We done
like, we
enough.
want to look at, let's say we get, I don't even want, we get X
Excuse
amount
me.
of, fund, we get X amount from the bid, and so then we come back and say, at that point in time, maybe it would make sense then to go back to the architects and say, we
Yes.
have, I don't even, like,
dollars.
25 bananas. So, you know what I mean? I don't know, I don't even want to put a number out there.
I know, yeah,
But you know what I'm
right,
saying,
you're
and what can
following,
we get
right.
for this?
Right.
And then we say, are we okay with staying with this, or do we want more, need more?
Right.
And where
Yeah.
are we at? You know what I mean, for that?
Well, and I felt like that's where we were in August, that like, let's try to figure out how many bananas we have, and then we can decide, how far we have to take the conversation
Is that gonna be
beyond
enough for
that.
where we are?
Right.
And I'm just gonna say, if we are basing it upon finishing up phase one
Right.
and then looking at phase two, we're not gonna have enough bananas.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we're gonna need a lot more. We're gonna need some bushels.
Yeah.
All right. We're gonna keep having this conversation.
We are. It's important. We need to have it.
All right.
It's- Okay.
Set up meetings, there's no other exploration work that I need to be doing right now.
No,
It's
I
just-
don't think so.
No.
Okay.
No, I think we're
Just
just
wanna
gonna,
make
I
Just
don't
wanna make
want
sure.
any, I can't.
Where does emergency services come into play?
like if ends up being like a senior living, facility, just that there would, it would be important to consult with them, that they would, might need.
They might need a new ambulance.
Like a staff
Right,
problem or
things like that.
something, like they would have enough.
No, they might
people
have
to-
more
Right, yeah, it's
you know
more
what I
calls
mean?
is an issue.
More
like,
calls, things
Yeah.
like that.
For fire department, ambulance services are generally the most calls, right? And so the issue is if they're going to have a significant number of seniors in a particular area,
Right.
access in and outs and
Right.
costs, things and all of that nature.
Yeah.
And depending on how tall the building was, whether or not they needed to get a ladder truck, I feel like that was part of the discussion as well. Does that sound right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Seems,
Yep.
seems pretty detailed at that point, but. I
But
mean,
just in the spirit of,
Sure.
what are the things that,
Yeah.
we should just be understanding? like
Impact fees.
All of those things,
I mean,
right?
but back to that impact fee is on the developer. That's not upon.
Yes,
off us.
it's on.
Right, and
Right.
that could be, though, in there, you could, I mean, in part of the approval of that, that could be part of the, where we agree to donate an ambulance, or, I don't know. Do you know what I'm trying to
Oh,
say?
but,
Right, to get that approved through zoning. I mean, that could be through the developer to help that.
But impact fees are part of residential. Is it, so does
Well, the
that
impact fees are
consider
part of
the
residential,
senior-
and senior living is residential. The amount of money that's going to be generated for us, for the school,
will probably be reducing it. And I don't know, I haven't looked at their ordinances for other governmental bodies that aren't you guys. But there may be different, like, for example, Park District is going to get, whether it's school, or whether it's, I'd assume, whether it's a residential for younger families or older, Park District facilities still are going to be used by those people. So it's a little different calculation, a little different type of thing they're looking at. So they could have something similar for those emergency services that are different. But for us, the school, yes, it would be most likely you would be not getting very much in impact fees if it's, you know, a senior living type of arrangement.
Impact.
But other folks still would have an impact.
Thinking about this, to be honest. I was thinking about
Based on the
everybody
impact,
with
yeah.
those friends. So, all right.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything else? No.
Thanks, Jill. Thank you for summarizing. Thank you, Tim.
Did I?
For summarizing and summarizing tonight's
Yes.
discussion. Appreciate that.
All right, thank you, everybody. Now is the second opportunity. All right, so we are good. Marilyn is shaking her head no. There's nobody signed up to speak. So that's it. May I please have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second.
Thank you.
That was a long pause.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned.
least
Thank
nobody
you,
voted
everybody.
no.
Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. Have a good